Everyone in Babel Academy is watching the freshman valedictorians show off their power. First, the combat department's monster, Jake Myers, steps into the arena. He then launches forward and starts punching the robot with his bare hand. I mean, this guy's hands are on steroids, pummeling the robot's C rank until it becomes nothing but scraps. Then, Inoue Erika from the support department sends out her crow and pierces through another armored machine as if it were made of paper. The crowd goes wild, and after seeing those insane performances, no one expects much from the refining department's valedictorian. After all, Sihan is just a blacksmith, but when it is finally his turn, he does something no one expects. Instead of choosing an easy target, he asks for the robot to be equipped with armor. Everyone thinks he has lost his mind because that machine can even withstand attacks from stronger fighters. Some students laugh, others doubt him, and the people waiting for him to fail are already smiling. But Sihan does not care. He simply draws his 5-color fire blade and combines it with the fire-accumulating sheath he created himself. The flames inside the sword begin clashing violently, creating a power that could injure him if he loses control for even a second. But Sihan handles it perfectly. Then, in front of the entire academy, he unleashes wildfire. In one attack, the armored robot is completely erased from the arena, leaving only a massive destroyed trail from his attack. The students, the host, and even the professors are left speechless, because what no one understands is that Sihan is not just a talented freshman, he is a regressor, a blacksmith from the ruined future, because in the past, the whole world has already been destroyed, and only one man is still standing in the middle of the endless sea. His body is covered in blood, one of his eyes is gone, and the comrades who fought beside him are already on the edge of death. This man is our Guy Lee Sihan, the last blacksmith of humanity. Together with the 3 strongest mad dogs, he managed to defeat one of the 6 demon gods that tried to wipe out the planet. But even after killing the demon god, the sea does not disappear. The world is still sinking and everything they sacrificed was for nothing. One by one, his comrades die from their wounds, leaving Sihan completely alone. All he can do is place their weapons beside them like grave markers and stare at the ruined world with regret. If he had awakened his true blacksmithing power earlier, things might have been different. If he had convinced those 3 monsters to help humanity sooner, maybe the world could have been saved. But now, it is already too late. With nothing left, Sihan uses his final strength to activate his blacksmith skill one last time. He extracts a mysterious ore from his own bond and begins hammering all of his regrets into it. Strike after strike, he pours everything into the empty stone until it finally becomes a dagger. But the dagger has no special power, no incredible ability, and no miracle that can save him. Disappointed, Sihan decides to end his life before the sea swallows him completely. He stabs the dagger into his own heart and sinks into the waves. But just before death claims him, the hidden power of the weapon finally awakens. A skill activates, sending him back to the origin. Moments later, Sihan hears someone calling his name aggressively, asking him why he is zoning out. Sihan tries to make sense of what is happening, because being called a candidate is not something he has heard in 31 years. It is when the examiner asks him why he is zoning out in the middle of an entrance exam that the realization of things dawns on him. He looks around to see what appears to be a blacksmith workshop, and he assumes that he is experiencing the usual phenomenon where one's life flashes before their eyes. Suddenly, it dawns on him that a certain skill called Return to Origin activated just before he died. He wonders if this skill came from the weapon he made with his bondstone. The examiner, Han, tells Sihan that he is on his last warning, and if he fails to do what is asked the right way, he will be kicked out. Sihan acknowledges this, and he looks at his reflection through the hammer with the realization that he has regressed. However, one thing remains constant in his mind, and this is the fact that he could have changed things if he had embraced his profession a bit earlier. Since he has been given another opportunity, Sihan promises himself that he will give it all he has and protect the world. Sihan is determined to pass the Babel entrance examination this time around. He also has plans to meet the 3 dogs as early as he can to set up his plan. Sihan then takes up the hammer, and he starts hammering on the material given to him. Suddenly, a professor present in the room who is overseeing the examination hears the sound of his rhythm, and this catches his attention. He turns around to take a look at what Sihan is doing, and he realizes that he might be slow on the job, but he is working with the perfect rhythm. The professor realizes that what he is currently witnessing is top-tier forging skill. Moments later, Sihan is done forging the blade, and it looks so perfect that even the professor is left in awe. The assistant who was just scolding him minutes earlier was left in total astonishment. The professor knows fully well that Sihan is passing brilliantly if he submits the blade as it is, but Sihan suddenly does something that shocks everyone. Sihan proceeds to smash the blade, leaving the 2 in utter confusion. It turns out that Sihan believes that what he just made is nothing but trash, which he cannot present. Han yells at him, asking him if he just destroyed a weapon in front of the professor as if smithing is a joke. Si-han shocks them, telling them that he needs a new set of materials because he would like to remake the assignment. Han yells at him, and just as he is about to start scolding him, the professor cuts in, telling him to bring Si-han the materials that he needs. Han is taken aback when he hears this, and the professor points out the fact that Si-han didn't break any rules with what he did, so if he is not ready to go get the materials, he would go get them himself. Han realizes that the professor is really serious about what he said, and he rushes off to get the materials. The professor then turns to Si-han, asking him if he is aware that there are only 40 minutes left for the exam, and Si-han replies that he knows. The professor proceeds to ask him if he thinks that breaking the sword was the right decision, and Si-han's answer is that he can't submit something as ridiculous as the sword he just made. The professor takes a deep breath when he hears this, and he tells Si-han to do his best. Si-han knows that with his current body, achieving the perfect forging is going to be extremely difficult, but he knows one way out. Just then, Si-han infuses mana into the ignition stones, and when everyone else sees this, they yell at him, asking him if he is trying to cause an explosion. Before they can stop him, Si-han throws the mana-infused stones into the fire, leaving the other candidates staring in utter confusion. The effect of this gives off to multicolored fire that scares the shit out of the other candidates. The bright light from the fire scares them, and they scream out, asking for a fire extinguisher. Even Han panics, and he urges the professor to stop Si-han, but the professor remains the only calm person in the room. He tells Han to just let Si-han do his thing, while scolding Han for reacting like the other candidates. The professor tells Han to closely observe the flow of the flames, which is the 5-color fire demon. It is a type of high-temperature flame that is enhanced by the resonance of 5 types of ignition stones. Even though it requires accurate mana control, it is an excellent technique that can be used with minimal mana. Moments later, the other candidates start watching in, or because the explosion they were expecting didn't happen. In fact, the color of the iron block has changed completely. The professor finally figures out what Si-han was doing by resonating the ignition stones to enhance the firepower to modify the properties of the iron block. The professor realizes that what he just did will significantly reduce the time needed for forging, but he still knows that it is going to be a hard run since there are only 30 minutes left on the clock. Si-han wastes no time as he begins hammering the ingot and heating it. He repeats the process continually with a smile on his face while ignoring the eyes staring at him. Not long after this, he runs out of mana, causing him to lose his protection, and this is thanks to the weak body that he has. He figures out that immediately after the exam, he has to start training without delay. Even though he is out of mana, he is not about to let that hold him back, and he continues hammering down on the metal block. Si-han ignores the pain in his body as the time runs down, and just as the timer reaches 1 minute, he finally produces the blade he wants. By the time the examiner told everyone to stop what they were doing, Si-han had produced the 5-color blade, and because of this, he acquired a C rank skill, the Artisan of Flame. The blade he managed to produce is a high-grade curved sword with 5 flames. The 5 flames in the blade react with mana, producing colorful hues, and the properties and color might actually change depending on the nature of the infused mana. The other candidates are left picking their jaws from the ground as they never expected Si-han to produce high-grade equipment. Si-han then tells the professor, Kim In-cheol, and Han to check the detailed description of the blade in the status window. Han almost loses his mind when he checks it, and he sees just how insane it is. Later on, Si-han is called to In-cheol's office. In-cheol asks him if the sword finally satisfies what he wants, and Si-han replies that it does for the moment. However, In-cheol can see the dissatisfaction on his face, and In-cheol decides to speak frankly to him. He tells him that the academy, Babel, will not give him what he wants, so it is better that he withdraws his application. In-cheol says Babel's reputation might be impressive, but the refining department has been trashed because there have been no notable results to present. Si-han stays silent because he is already aware of everything In-cheol is saying. Apparently, the refining department in Babel will be shut down in 8 years due to declining standards, and the Vulcan Academy will take the top spot in institutions that train the best blacksmiths. In-cheol is still trying to pitch Vulcan to him when Si-han cuts in, telling him that the best academy will not be Vulcan because he is going to make Babel, where he is currently enrolling, the best academy in the world. After hearing his determination, In-cheol concurs, but lets him know that they have to make him the department valedictorian first, and he asks Si-han if he is confident in himself. Si-han assures In-cheol that he is confident in himself, letting him know that there is no one on the student level who is better than him. In-cheol then asks him if he knows the process for selecting the freshman department valedictorian at the school, to which Si-han says yes. He explains that they select the best student in the department through an additional test between the top 2 students of the department. From these 2 candidates, the valedictorian is selected. Apparently, The academy divides its cadets into 3 departments. There is the combat department, anicap, the support department, and the technology department, Borsipa. Being a valedictorian in a department basically means the person has received the most outstanding evaluation among the several majors that are available in each department, so the person is thus acknowledged as a top-tier talent by the entire school. From a closer look at the professor's arm, there are tons of scars on his arm, showing how much he has gone through. Incheol then tells Si-hun that he has something to tell him as a senior blacksmith, not a school professor. He lets him know that if he becomes the department valedictorian, it will be hard for him to expect success, so he should just go to Vulcan Academy, claiming that this is the right path for Si-hun. Si-hun is impressed with the man's selflessness because he wants the best for him instead of trying to hold him down at the school. With this, Si-hun can conclude that Incheol is a good man. Si-hun then corrects him, telling him that just as he told him, the environment doesn't matter because Babel is going to become the best. Hearing his determination once again, Incheol lets him know that the statement is born from arrogance, but for some reason, he is not even pissed about it. Incheol then stretches his hand to shake Si-hun, telling him that he looks forward to working with him. By shaking Incheol's hand, Si-hun forms a bond with him, and Si-hun wastes no time extracting a bond metal from him. He is able to extract a flame-bearing iron with mid to low quality. It is basically a metal that possesses a flame, and it also possesses wood-like properties which can store fire internally. When Si-hun returns to his dorm room, he checks out the bond iron, and he is not entirely disappointed even though it is small. Basically, a bond extraction quantifies the relationship with a specific target, which helps to draw out ores that naturally do not exist. At the moment, Si-hun knows that he really cannot use the bond as it is because the bond level is still low. Si-hun then checks his stats, and he can see how trashy they are compared to the rest of the freshmen. Even though he has a long way to go, Si-hun doesn't really mind because he believes that it is a price he has to pay to return to the past. In fact, he is glad that he got the chance, and he aims to discard anything that might cause him to be greedy. Si-hun figures out that he still has enough time to take on the pandemonium monsters that will eventually threaten the entire planet. Since he is desperate to stop them, Si-hun figures out that there is no room to be picky. In addition, he wants to avoid an avenue where he gets confused about important future events, so he figures out that he has to obtain memory-related gears or skills. Nonetheless, he is glad that the first step, which is enrolling at Babel, is already resolved. Just then, the system informs him that his bond level has reached level 1, and he has obtained the bond imprint skill. A week later, Si-hun is seen walking around after he got lost yet again. He finally manages to locate the refining room where he is headed, and the moment he enters, he finds some elders waiting for him. The vice dean of the department, Michael Barmet, is also in attendance, and he is pissed at Si-hun for coming late. However, Incheol defends Si-hun, reminding the vice dean that there are still 10 minutes before the exam even starts. Michael argues that it is not a matter of time but the right attitude. He then proceeds to give Si-hun a warning about this. Witnessing what just happened, Si-hun finally realizes why Incheol was recommending another academy, and this is because the department is rotten. Also present in the room is another student, like Si-hun, who is there to take the additional exam. Si-hun tries to greet the dude, but the reaction and attitude from him shut him off completely. Moments later, a red-headed woman, the dean of the department, Yunya, finally makes her appearance, and the moment Si-hun lays his eyes on her, he recognizes her. He almost loses his mind internally because he wasn't expecting to find Yunya at the department. Even though he heard that Yunya was working at the department, he never expected her to be the dean. Apparently, he knows her as the S-rank hero, also called the Weapon Eater. She is a hero who possesses a unique skill that amplifies her power by devouring weapons. Before Si-hun's regression, she was his regular customer, but in the end, she died in battle just like everyone else. Si-hun watched her die back then, and her last statement was telling him that she regretted eating his armament. Seeing her right there in the flesh again causes him to completely zone out. He finally comes back to reality when his name is called in preparation for the exam. Incheol proceeds to explain the details of the exam to the 2 candidates, who are there to take the additional exam. He mentions that the total time is 90 minutes, and during these 90 minutes, the 2 of them must create an armament, which can be paired with the sword from the previous exam. Incheol then casts a fire spell to tell them that they can only use alchemy smithing to craft it. There are a bunch of materials present in the room, and Incheol lets them know that they are free to use any of the provided materials. He mentions that the created armaments will be judged by Yuna and Michael, so he urges them to create something mind-blowing. With the explanations out of the way, he tells them to start the exam. Since they are only allowed to use alchemy smithing, Si-hun figures out that he has to create a resonance using only pure mana so that the elemental mana doesn't go berserk. Si-hun takes a minute to prepare, and he stares at the materials while thinking of his plan. He is in the middle of this when his opponent throws a jab at him, asking him if staring at the materials increases his mana. Sihun doesn't want to believe that the dude is talking to him, so he is forced to ask him if what he just said was directed at him. The dude piles on the trash talk, asking Sihun if he sees anyone else there. Just then, Inkyol comes in to call the dude to order, and he addresses him by his name, Hans Barmet. Hans acknowledges the warning, but Sihun already picks something up from the whole interaction. From the name alone, he immediately figures out that Hans is Michael's son, which basically means he is serving as a judge in an exam where his son is being tested. Sihun stares at Hans and realizes he and Michael actually look alike. Seeing how Sihun is staring at him, Hans realizes that Sihun has figured out who he is. Hans lets out a cold smile with the belief that this will intimidate Sihun. Hans has already read Sihun's file, and he knows that he is a mere commoner with the lowest family background and lowest manner among the freshmen. Hans, on the other hand, was born into the Barmet family, which is a renowned house of alchemy and smithing. He also possesses a mana capacity that is comparable to a second-year department valedictorian, so he is confident that he has already won the exam. Yunya notices that the materials that the two want to use are lazurite and Hainam jade, which are materials with high mana content. Michael then adds that they are elemental materials that are imbued with water attribute mana, and because they are sensitive to fire, it makes them difficult to smith. However, Michael is not worried about this as he considers it a thing of the past, revealing that modern alchemy smithing is different from how it used to be. Inkyol admits that alchemy smithing is not bound by space or situation, but he believes that smithing time varies greatly depending on the caster and the materials being used. He is about to add more to what he is saying when Michael cuts in, telling him that Hans can synthesize any or within 30 minutes. Inkyol is shocked when he hears this because being able to perform a resonant synthesis in 30 minutes is crazy work. In fact, Hans is already at a level that is beyond the second-year students, so making him compete against a freshman is nothing but cheating. Inkyol realizes that the exam is based on a time basis, where there are abundant materials, whereas the smithing method is restricted. It finally dawns on Inkyol that an exam that is advantageous to Hans has been chosen from the very beginning. Suddenly, Sihun does something that they are not expecting by grabbing a hydrate and crimson firestone. When Michael sees this, he believes that Sihun is just trying to act all high and mighty. Hans also notices the ores that Sihun has picked, and he wonders if he intentionally picked ores that contrast with his own. Hans considers Sihun a fool because he believes that with the mana he possesses, there is no way he will be able to control the Crimson Firestone. His smile soon fades when he sees Sihun working on the material much better than expected. Sihun has activated his bond imprint, which allows him to equip and use bond stones. He then equips the bond iron that he obtained from Inkyol, and he wears it on his right arm to be able to control the flames. Seeing how easily he is controlling the flames on his arm, Hans groans in frustration, and he concludes that Sihun is using useless, cheap tricks. With excitement written all over his face, Sihun gets down to business as he combines the ores he wants, melting them together. This leaves Michael wondering if he plans to make a resonance using the same attribute as the minerals. Nonetheless, Michael is confused that he has chosen a stupid path because he believes that if the minerals are forced, the elemental mana will go berserk. Michael expects Sihun to cause an accident in the room, but he shuts up when Sihun unleashes massive firepower that everyone in the room can feel how intense it is. After the process was done, Sihun had created a fire-accumulating sheath. Everyone in the room is left staring at him in silence, trying to understand what they just witnessed. The fire-accumulating sheath is a rare-grade item that is imbued with fire attribute mana. It basically stores fire mana and allows the owner to use the skill Wildfire. This is left in complete shambles as he doesn't want to accept the fact that Sihun had completed the test. What he was told was that elemental mana would go berserk if done the way Sihun did it, but Sihun had succeeded contrary to what he knew. Hans completely loses focus and he goes ahead to imbue mana stones with elemental mana. Before his father could warn him, he had messed up, and this ultimately caused his ores to go berserk, resulting in a mana explosion. As a result of the explosion, Hans suffered minor injuries to his arm, and the materials he was working with also shattered into pieces. Basically, with the outcome of things, it is supposed to end with Hans forfeiting the exam. But Michael quickly jumps in, saying it is best that they declare the exam void because a student was injured in the course of the exam. He suggests that they announce a re-examination date later, but Inkyol argues with him, telling him that they cannot overturn an exam that has already taken place. Inkyol reminds him that the issue was caused by Hans' own carelessness. Michael tries to gaslight Inkyol, saying it appears that he cares more about the exam results than the student. Michael then gets up to prove his point, saying the fastest resonance speed that the academy holds is 5 minutes, so there's no way Sihun, a student who just activated his mana not long ago, is able to achieve such a fast resonance. While Michael is making his claims, Sihun just stands there, staring at him. Apparently, alchemy smithing was originally a technique born to craft armaments using only mana in situations where normal smithing was impossible. What the smithing is about is not the traditional smithing method of killing the ore to fill it with the blacksmith's life, but it is about finding the roots of the mineral core and unfolding the life of the ore itself. This is essentially what Sihun had just accomplished, and the Smithing Academy will eventually uncover this method after numerous trials and errors. It is more or less a simple method that will become the standard in a couple of years, so Sihun doesn't see any need to keep it a secret. However, he has no interest in teaching it to someone like Michael, who just barks threats without listening. Sihun finally speaks up, telling Michael that he has no idea what he is trying to get at, and Michael only uses this to strengthen his point, saying Sihun used a fraudulent method. Michael considers it impossible for a freshman with no proper family background to create a rare-grade armament. He tells Sihun that he should have just kept the whole thing within the realm of possibility, since he knows that he wanted to cheat. Sihun starts getting pissed when he hears the words coming out of his mouth, and Michael's son wastes no time supporting his father. Michael then calls on Yuna, suggesting that they disqualify Sihun for being a fraud, and he suggests that they proceed with a re-examination. Just then, Yuna walks past Michael, and she grabs the sheath that Sihun created. While staring at the item, she declares that it makes no sense, and before she knows it, she is already drooling. She completely loses herself, and she urges Sihun to give her just one bite, or even one lick. Michael and Inkyul stand there in confusion, wondering what the Dean is talking about. Before Yunya knows it, her stomach is already growling, begging to be fed. Later that afternoon, Sihun strolls through the downtown area, thinking about the events of the day. He concludes that the fine-tuning on the sheath is still immature. However, he is exhilarated to have seen how Michael was losing his mind thanks to what he created. He stands in the middle of the street, laughing like a maniac, and those who are passing immediately conclude that he has gone mad. Just then, it dawns on him that the barmat name actually rings a bell, and he tries to remember from where he has heard it before. He remembers Louise once telling him that when she was at Babel, the armament she bought for a low price after working blue-collar jobs suddenly exploded. It turns out that this was how she got the mana burns, which caused her to get mana burns. It turns out that Barmat was the blacksmith who sold the materials to Louise. However, Sihun doesn't know if the person in question is Michael or his trash son, Hans. Basically, Sihun's first goal was to find the 3 dogs to rehabilitate them, but with what he has found out, he realizes that there won't be a need for that with Louise, the explosive dog. Sihun figures out that by stopping Barmat from doing his bad deeds, Louise will not go on the dark path. Later on, at the technology department conference room, Ornher informs the other professors of her plan to make Sihun the department's valedictorian. The professors are shocked to hear this, but Ornher's mind seems to be made up, and she asks them if there are any objections whatsoever. Michael raises an indirect objection, reminding Ornher that it hasn't been long since she took office, so she obviously doesn't know how things are done. The other professors agree with Michael, saying Sihun's item might have been impressive, but they want them to at least review it even more closely. Inkyul then tells the other professors that they are acting this way because they have not witnessed what Sihun can do firsthand. Inkyul lets them know that Sihun still has a lot in the bag to show them. The Dean mentions that the item Sihun created is likely less than 60% of what Sihun was aiming for, and this is exactly what makes him a promising young man. Ornher then shocks the professors by telling them that if they are not willing to accept her decision to make Sihun the department valedictorian, she is going to step down from her position as the Dean. In a quick revelation, it appears that the Tower of Heroes was sent down 54 years ago to help with humanity's evolution. In response to this, the underground world unleashed the Swamp of Pandemonium, which corrupts life. While humanity gained new possibilities to pursue, a massive calamity was also born at the same time. It was during this time that Babel was also founded. Babel is the largest academy in history, and it is established in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Babel is so effective that it has produced so many heroes up until that moment. While addressing the students, this is the Ascension Emperor, Ludwig Schubert, speaking to them in the arena. He lets the students know that they also have the potential to become one of the said heroes. Sihun is present at the arena, and he is not entirely moved by Ludwig's speech because he knows that he is not entirely a good person. Apparently, a ceremony where the valedictorian will be demonstrating for the students is being held. The host urges the freshman valedictorian cadets to come to the stage, and Sihun joins his other 2 colleagues as they climb the stage. Seeing how everyone is roaring to celebrate them, Sihun finally understands why everyone in his past life was always crazy about being a valedictorian. The host mentions that the demonstration is about to begin, and the item that will be used is the golem that was produced by the marionette factory an automaton mode 9. The robot is presented to the student, and its presence alone commands an immense aura. The host tells the spectators that the robot possesses the performance capacity to spar with a C-rank hero. Sihan is impressed with the robot stats because it is a combat-type robot. However, the lack of weapons tells him that the robot must wield martial arts. The host mentions that the first demonstration against the combat-type robot will be carried out by the combat department's valedictorian, Jake Myers. Sihan remembers Jake as the odd one in his family, who uses martial arts instead of swords, even though it is the family heritage to use swords. As the match begins, Jake holds up his arms in preparation for combat. The robot dashes toward him at great speed and then throws a punch at Jake, but he dodges the strike. The robot launches a couple more attacks, but Jake is just too fast to be hit by a mere robot. He simply dodges everything, and after he finally gets bored, he decides to turn things up a notch. With a smile on his face, Jake dashes toward the robot, and he delivers a powerful punch that packs so much force it leaves a shockwave behind. The robot tries to block, but it gets punched through with a single punch. Everyone in the arena is left in shock when they see this, including Sihan. Apparently what he heard was that Jake died as an A-rank in his mid-20s. However, with what he just witnessed, Sihan is convinced that he is a prodigy that the likes of the academy only get to see once in a decade. With the kind of power he wields, Sihan wonders why Jake ended up as only an A-rank in his past life. Jake doesn't stop by putting a hole in the robot, and he finishes it off by completely dismantling it with a powerful punch. The robot is completely trashed, with the head flying off in a different direction while its body scatters all over the arena. Jake smiles, saying it is nice to get into action after a while. While Jake is acting like he just did something normal, everybody else is left staring at him like he is some kind of maniac. He basically subdued a robot with combat power that is equal to a C-rank hero without breaking a sweat. The host shouts his praise, talking about how Jake is the type of person expected to come from the combat department. Sihan realizes that with Jake's performance, the next person on the list will feel some serious pressure. The host then calls up the support department's valedictorian, Inoue, Erika. The moment Sihan hears her name, he realizes that she is also a powerhouse, so there is no way she is going to feel any form of pressure whatsoever. Erika is the eldest daughter of the Inoue family, which is one of the 3 great families of Japan. Even though she wasn't overwhelmingly powerful, she made a name for herself as an S-rank hero who wields a myth-grade armament. However, in the end, she had been corrupted into a Magan and was directly subjugated by her own family. Sihan is thinking about how Erika won't be of any service to him when Erika suddenly turns around to look at him, leaving him totally shocked. Erika climbs the stage with a birdcage in hand, and the host mentions that the robot to be used in this demonstration is the Model 9 robot, which is equipped with armor. The host says the robot boasts a defense that is approximately 1.5 times that of the model that was just destroyed by Jake. This leaves everyone asking what sort of performance Erika will drop for them. Erika then raised her birdcage, and she let loose the crow inside it. The crow flies high into the sky to get a good look at the robot, and the robot immediately goes into a defensive stance. With this, Sihan believes that it is going to be hard for Erika to pierce through, since the robot is a defensive type. Just then, Erika casts a spell, and armor forms around the crow's head. The moment she is done arming her crow, the crow dives bomb toward the robot. With the incredible speed and the force from the crow's body, it cuts through the robot, leaving a huge hole in it, thus defeating the robot. The crow then returns to Erika, and the whole arena roars in excitement, declaring that Erika is amazing. Seeing what Erika and Jake have just done, Sihan realizes that he cannot do something basic because he is just going to get booed. Just then, the host calls him to the stage to demonstrate what he is capable of. It turns out that Ludwig and Yuna are supervisors for the demonstration, and since it's been a while since they had someone come from the refining department, Ludwig believes that Sihan might be under pressure. However, Unya assures him that there won't be any issue whatsoever. Back in the arena, the host teases the spectators, asking them if Sihan will be able to show them a performance that supersedes that of Jake and Erika. Sihan unsheathes his sword, and the moment his armament details are displayed on the screen, the students are left in awe. Nonetheless, they still believe that the item lacks enough force compared to the others. Michael can hear the other students doubting Sihan's capabilities, and Michael smiles, believing that Sihan is going to fail. In fact, he is waiting for him to fail so that he can get the position of Dean from Yuna. The host then mentions that the robot that will be used in the demonstration is equivalent to a D-rank hero, but Sihan cuts in, saying he wants the robot to be equipped with armor. The host is shocked when he hears this, and he assumes that Sihan has gone mad because the model that is being used is a type of model that can even tank attacks from a B-rank hero in some cases. The host can't believe that he still wants something like that to be equipped with armor. The host then tells him that it is hard to prepare something like this on such short notice, asking Sihan if he is trying to ruin the demonstration event. Suddenly, Inkyul appears on the scene, revealing that he has prepared the robot in advance. He unveils a robot that has been equipped with armor, and the robot looks completely insane. Sihan heaves a sigh of relief because Inkyul just saved him at the last minute, and Inkyul leaves him with one final motivational word, telling him to go wild during the demonstration. The host has no choice but to start the match, and since Inkyul has already told him to do his best, Sihan figures out that it would be bad if he doesn't live up to his expectations. Sihan grabs his sword and he activates the multicolored fire, which excites the students. Hans, on the other hand, is a clear hater, so he believes that Sihan is just doing rubbish. He doesn't believe in Sihan because he lacks mana, so he is confident that he won't amount to anything. Basically, the flames contained within the 5-color fireblade have the property of clashing with one another, and the explosion from this can injure the user if it is not controlled with a considerable amount of mana. However, by using the property of the fire accumulating sheath to store flames internally and injecting crimson flames inside using the artisan of flame, Sihan is able to produce an overwhelming amount of flame called wildfire. Once the process is complete, Sihan unleashes the wildfire, resulting in a scary, destructive force that removes the robot completely from the arena while leaving a huge hole in its wake. Everyone in the arena is left shaken from what they just witnessed, and even the host trembles as he calls on the construction team, telling them to make their way to the arena immediately. Sihan is able to end the demonstration evaluation on a high note, removing whatever pressure that his predecessors aimed to put on him. After the evaluation, Yuna calls Sihan to her office. She shows up late, and she apologizes, saying they had to clean up the arena, but Sihan replies that he should be the one apologizing for causing such destruction. He tells Anya that he should have controlled the whole thing better, but Yuna asks him why he is saying such words. Sihan expresses his concern because he believes that Yuna called him over to scold him, but Yuna tells him that he is wrong. Suddenly, Yuna's stomach starts growling again, and Yuna quickly speaks up, telling Sihan that she is going to pay him 10 times the market price of the 5-color fireblade and the fire-accumulating sheath if he is willing to sell them to her. Sihan is left in shock when he hears this, and just then, the system informs Sihan that a bond has been formed between him and Yuna. Sihan is surprised that a bond has already been established because this only happened after he fed her weapons a bunch of times in his past life. Sihan thanks Yuna for commending his armaments, and he figures out that he has just been given a good opportunity. Without wasting time, he proceeds with a bond extraction, and he is able to extract a bond iron called gluttony iron from Yuna. It is a high-grade and supreme quality bond. It can also feed on iron to create what is known as mineral blood. Sihan watches in amazement as he grabs the bond in his hand. He is carried away by how amazing it is that he speaks out, saying it is done. Yuna assumes that he has agreed to sell the armaments to her, but he quickly clears the air. Yuna then points out the fact that he said it was done, but before they can talk further, Inkyul shows up, telling Yuna that Ludwig has said the presentation ceremony will proceed immediately. Inkyul asks if he can take Sihan with him, and Ona agrees to this. As Sihan leaves the room, he tells Ona that he will see her later. Inkyul then leads Sihan to the heart of the academy, where the old main building, the Marduk mansion, sits. It turns out that he is taking him to meet Ludwig, and he urges him to behave himself in front of the academy head. Inkyul says Ludwig didn't take issue with Sihan breaking the arena during the presentation, and he adds that Ludwig is on a whole different level from them. As he steps into the room, Sihan tells Inkyul that he has nothing to worry about. Upon entering the room, Sihan is hit with Ludwig's impressive aura. Before the regression, he was the hero who died alone while fighting the demon god of extermination Sky, which is one of the 6 great demon gods. Seeing how the man carries himself, Sihan finally gets to understand what it means to be a perfectionist. Ludwig tells Sihan that the armaments that he showed at the demonstration were all interesting, and even though he can't say that there are no regrets, he is impressed. Sihan hears this, and he wonders what his regrets are. Ludwig then shocks him, telling him that as a tribute to his talent and effort, he is going to give him 2 rewards, so he urges Sihan to ask what he wants. Sihan thinks about it for a minute before revealing that he wants rewards that will increase his mana and memory capacity. Ludwig doesn't argue with him, and he raises his hand to whip out the rewards he asked for from an armament that looks like a keyhole. The 2 items he whips out are Heavy Ink Rock and Dream Ivory. The Heavy Ink Rock is a hero-grade and supreme quality item. It is a shard of ink colored that fell from the night, and it possesses the property of swallowing everything except darkness. It absorbs mana from basically everything that comes into contact with it. As for the Dream Ivory, it is a hero-grade and medium quality item. It is the tusk of a dream-devouring Baku, which is imbued with dreamlike mana, capable of crossing the boundary between reality and dreams. It also allows contact with dreams by using dreamlike mana. Sihan is left speechless when he sees the items he was given because they are items that are nearly impossible to find. Even though it is going to be hard for him to use it at the moment, Sihan is confident that he has a way around it. Ludwig then asks him if he likes the items, and Sihan lets him know that they are just the perfect items that he was looking for. After leaving Ludwig's chambers, the keyhole armament speaks to Ludwig, asking him why Sihan is the only one who received 2 rewards out of the 3 who competed. Ludwig replies that he simply gave out the rewards because he believes that Sihan has the capacity to handle them. The armament then mentions that it got the feeling of an old man from Sihan. Ludwig then says this basically means Sihan has an incredible depth for the armament to have seen him that way. Even Ludwig admits that he doesn't know how deep Sihan goes. Later on, Hans is boasting to his classmates about what he plans to do after school when Sihan enters the room like the main character that he is. He stares at Hans with a menacing look that scares the shit out of him, leaving him to wonder what is wrong with Sihan. Sihan just walks past him to where his seat is, and with what he just did, he believes that Hans should already know his place. Moments later, Inkyol enters to take the class, and since it is the first class, he tells them that they are going to start with introductions. A bunch of ingots is wheeled into the room, and Inkyol tells them that what they are looking at is a material called projection alloy. He mentions that it is dozens of times more sensitive to mana than common ores. He proceeds to demonstrate what will happen, and in no time, he creates an armament that he had thought of in his mind. Sihan is impressed when he sees this, and he finally understands how Inkyol was able to make it into the top 100 artisans. He had also felt it during the Bondstone test that Inkyol is a real powerhouse. Inkyol then mentions that because of how sensitive the creation is, it is difficult to be used as an armament, but it reflects unconscious traits, allowing one to reflect upon oneself. He reveals that this is why they call the armaments made from the projection alloy alter egos. He tells the students that the refining department's self-introduction will be replaced by making the said alter egos. He tells them that these creations will be exhibited in the main building in a week, so he urges them to do their best. Sihan is impressed at how much funding the school is operating on because each projection alloy alone is quite expensive. After Inkyol's demonstration, the students started coming to the front to create something with the projection alloy. After a long while, it finally gets to Sihan's turn. Sihan heads to the front, and he decides to go all out, since he is already the department valedictorian, so hiding his power is a waste. Sihan proceeds to infuse the material with mana, and in the process, he unleashes a massive force that almost buries the class. A week later, each student's creation is displayed in the main hall just as Inkyol had promised. Sihan's production, which is more or less a bunch of armaments that are stuck together, has everyone talking. Some students believe that what happened is a mere coincidence because it has been a while since a valedictorian came from the refining department, so they are basically pushing him to be a genius. However, Erika, who is also present in the room, cuts in, telling them that they are wrong. Jake appears on the scene and also agrees with her, saying the amount of projection alloys that is in the production wasn't enough to express Sihan's potential, which is why it ended the way it did. Meanwhile, Sihan is stuck in the workshop, working himself to the bone like a maniac, while the other students just stare at him in amazement. Even Han is left in confusion, wondering what they are supposed to teach a kid like Sihan, who basically knows everything. After Han is done teaching the rest of the class for the day, he turns around to see that Sihan is still working really hard. He then notices that Sihan appears to be dissatisfied with the blade he just made. Just as Sihan is about to break it, just as he did during the entrance examination, Han cuts in to get his attention. He tells Sihan that they have to deliver them after the week smithing class, so he urges him not to break them. Sihan asks him what he means by delivering them, and Han asks him how he thinks cadets get their funding. Han reveals that Babel provides support based on the track record of weapons sold externally. He then asks Sihan what he is currently dissatisfied with between his body and his mana. Sihan nervously replies that it is his body. Apparently, to make training tools, he needs to smith the heavy ink rock, but he currently lacks the stamina to attempt it. Han then suggests that he use buffs instead of engaging in physical training, since he is focused on smithing. Sihan's mind is blown away when he hears this because it is a method he had not considered since he had avoided it before regressing. However, he has now returned to the past, and he lacks stamina, so he figures out that he can just smith heavy ink rock while he is under the effect of a buff. Sihan bows to Han, thanking him for the advice. In return, Sihan tells Han that whenever he is forging, he uses too much mana, so he advises him to reduce it to 70% of what he is currently using and focus on the strike on a single point instead. As he leaves the room, it finally dawns on Han that he just got pointers from a freshman, but he is not one to discard the advice. Apparently, the academy encourages autonomous learning for each student, so they are free to take classes from other departments, or even take dozens of classes in a single semester. However, the cadet must complete their major courses, and if the cadet accumulates 3 failing grades, they are automatically expelled. Sihan then gets on a train heading to the Department of Sorcery. After the train comes to a halt, he steps out only to run into Erika and 2 of her lackeys. The guys with Erika yell at Sihan, telling him to move out of the way, but Sihan is not one to be intimidated, so he tells them to move instead. While her lackeys are busy acting tough, Erika just stands there, staring at Sihan. She finally speaks up, asking him where he is going, and Sihan replies that he is heading to the Department of Sorcery because he is looking to take any of their classes. Erika ultimately shocks her lackeys by offering to lead Sihan to the department. The 2 try telling her about the gathering that they are supposed to go to, but she tells them to go by themselves. They try to convince her, reminding her that seniors want her to attend, but she replies that she is not interested, shocking the 2 to their bones. Instead of backing off, the 2 secretly follow Erika and Sihan. Erika then asks Sihan what kind of course he is looking to take, and Sihan replies that he is trying to learn about buffs. Erika asks him what kind of buffs he is talking about, and Sihan replies that he wants something that enhances physical abilities, but it shouldn't interfere with smithing. Erika then asks him what he thinks about barrier arts, but Sihan hesitates because he believes that these are specialized for defense. Erika clears up his misconception, telling him that it all depends on how he uses it. Erika then whips out an invitation card to use as an example. She applies her barrier spell to the card, and she hands it over to Sihan, telling him to try to tear it. Sihan collects the card, wondering if she increased the durability, but soon finds out it maintains its original properties, but only hardens when subjected to a strong force. Sihan admits that the technique suits smithing well since it requires delicate control, and Erika boasts about her handiwork, saying he is probably going to need a professor for something like this. While she is boasting about her impressive barrier, Sihan is already trying to figure out why the spell feels very familiar. Sihan finally figures it out, and Erika is left in utter shock when Sihan easily tears the invitation card. Erika cannot believe that Sihan just dismantled her family's barrier arts in a couple of minutes. Sihan throws the torn card to the ground, and he thanks Erika for her advice, telling her that barrier arts definitely seem useful. Sihan then tells Erika that he is leaving to register for classes, while urging her to grab a meal or do something else with the 2 dudes who have been following her. As Sihan leaves, Erika expresses her sadness because she had given Sihan the invitation, so he could use it. Instead of staying back, Erika makes sure to follow Sihan to the department as he registers for his classes. She sticks with him for the next couple of days till rumors start flying around about the 2. They start assuming that Erika has feelings for Sihan, but Sihan is convinced that she doesn't because a bond would have been established if she did. Sihan decides to push the rumors aside because he is worried about the test he is supposed to take before being accepted into the class that he wants. Erika then leads him to the test site for the barrier composition, which is located inside a forest. Sihan finds other students there, and with the way they are all acting confused, Sihan wonders if they are there for a treasure hunt or something. Sihan starts looking around, wondering what he is supposed to find, and suddenly he walks through a barrier to find 2 teachers standing behind it. They are shocked when they see him walk through the barrier like it is nothing, and one of them tells him that he has passed the test, leaving Sihan himself confused. Earlier on, the professor of barrier, Robert Perry, learns about how Erika has been following Sihan around. Robert finally understands why Sihan applied for barrier basic lessons. However, he can't complain because applicants have tripled thanks to Sihan applying for the course. Apparently, for the year, they plan to add a test using the disorienting soul labyrinth. This is a barrier that distorts senses to make one lose their way. It is more or less a basic barrier, but if one is ignorant about sorcery, they wouldn't be able to detect it. Now, seeing how Sihan easily figured it out, Robert and his assistant are left in complete shock. In fact, they are more surprised that Erika didn't help him and was able to break through the disorienting soul labyrinth on instinct alone. After a while, Robert addresses the other students who passed the test alongside Erika and Sihan. They are informed that the classes will now be separated through a second test. A red-headed student quickly raises his hand, saying he would like to go first, and this is because he is looking to catch Erika's attention by performing exceptionally well. Robert then tells them about the second test, which is to dismantle the active barrier that has been placed before them using only mana. He tells them that he is going to grade them based on time, so they have to be quick and accurate. It is basically a spider web-shaped barrier, where the spider is the core. By sensing the mana that is traveling along the web, the spider will continually run, and as long as it exists, the web will infinitely regenerate. The redhead soon finds himself struggling against the barrier, which he never expected. Since his mana appears to be insufficient, he decides to pressure the spider with speed, and after 2 minutes and 20+ seconds of struggling, he is able to dismantle the barrier. The professor tells him that he has to pay attention to grasping the structure, but lets him know that he did pretty well. Gasping like a goat, he thanks the professor, but looking back, he can clearly see that Erika is disappointed in his performance. After this, the other students proceed to try to dismantle the barrier, just like him. After a while, Erika is called on to dismantle the barrier. She gracefully steps onto the barrier, and in mere 22 seconds, she takes care of the problem, leaving the students in awe. Robert admits that it is impressive, but he mentions that the standard dismantling method would have been 2 seconds faster, and Erika assures him that he is going to keep this in mind. Since everyone else has attempted it, Robert calls on Si-hun, who is the last on the list. Robert is not especially impressed by Si-hun, but he wants to see how he is going to perform. Si-hun bends down to observe the barrier, leaving the students to wonder what he is doing. Si-hun notices that the barrier has forms that resemble heavy ink rock. He realizes that the barrier is able to repair itself if it doesn't reach a certain point, which means that to smith heavy ink rock, he has to inject all stimulation simultaneously to match the ratios. While Si-hun is busy observing, Robert loses his patience and walks up to him. He is about to start scolding him when Erika tells the man to leave Si-hun alone. Si-hun finally figures out what he needs to do, and he completely collapses the barrier. Si-hun lets out a huge smile because by doing this, he also figured out a way to smith heavy ink rock. Si-hun then stands up to leave, and the assistant reads out the time he used, which amounts to 7 minutes and 45 seconds. While everyone else looks disappointed, Robert is staring in shock and amazement because he knows that the amount of time Si-hun used is not the problem here. He knows that Si-hun might have used 7 minutes for the current barrier, but he knows that the next time he encounters the same barrier, he's going to destroy it in mere seconds. Si-hun didn't only dismantle the barrier, but he basically created a formula for dismantling the spell itself. Robert fears that Si-hun might just be unstoppable if sorcery is added to the list of skills he already has. The following day, an email notice is sent out to the faculty of the refining department, asking for volunteers who want to supervise Si-hun's intermediate smithing test. At first, the administrator who sent out the email was skeptical that anyone would volunteer, but only a second after sending out the notice, several professors reached out, offering to supervise Si-hun. However, no one from Vice Dean Michael's faction sent a reply, confirming the rumors that his relationship with Si-hun is strained because his son was pushed down to second place during the department valedictorian assessment. The admin is about to select a supervisor from one of the volunteers, but to his surprise, he receives a message informing him that the dean will personally oversee Si-hun's intermediate smithing. On the day of the test, Si-hun is taken aback when he walks into the forge to see Yuna waiting for him. He wonders why she came to such a place despite her dignified status, and Yuna says she came to verify his skills. Since the dean herself came to watch him, Si-hun decides to do his best to show her his skill. Today, he plans to make use of the heavy ink rock he received from the Ascension Emperor, Ludwig. First, Si-hun plans to use the most difficult method of handling the rock, even though there are other, simpler ways. This difficult method is called the dark curtain process, where the heavy ink rock is placed in a dark place without light. Inside the enclosed space, mana is used to separate the impurities from the rock, which is spread like a liquid. During this process, the size of the heavy ink rock will decrease, but in exchange, its purity will increase. It might sound easy, but this is practically reconstructing matter, which is why it is known as the hardest method. Si-hun managed to complete the first step, and though he wasn't very satisfied with the results, he decided to make do because reducing the impurities further would affect the performance. He then proceeds to the second step, which is channeling mana through crimson flames to filter out only the suitable flames. The stabilized flame is called flowing wildfire, which possesses the property of maintaining the temperature from the moment it is formed. This flowing wildfire is needed for step 3, where Si-hun continuously strikes the rock with a hammer wrapped in the flowing wildfire. The most important thing during this process is to strike relentlessly until the distortion decreases due to the properties of the flowing wildfire. While Si-hun is focused on forging, Yuna quietly watches from behind, worried that the flames might be too hot for him. She can't help but imagine how hard Si-hun must have gradually pushed himself to be able to reach this point. Yuna watched as Si-hun continued hammering away until late in the evening, when she started dozing off. After 4 hours of heavy hammering, the properties of the heavy ink rock began changing, having absorbed the flowing wildfire flame to its limit. Once the rock stopped distorting, Si-hun melted the processed rock and poured it into the mold he had prepared beforehand. Yuna is surprised that he's casting the melted rock instead of forging, but she's more worried that the properties of the rock would change because of the darkness inside the mold. To her surprise, Si-hun slowed down the changes caused by the darkness with the barrier dismantling formula he learned from the sorcery department and constructed a mana circuit at the same time. Once he is done, he shatters the mold, revealing the ink spider bracelet armament he made from the heavy ink rock. After making a first-rate item despite his limited skills, Sihan is informed that he has acquired a new D-rank skill called Black Spirit Thread. The ink spider bracelet turns out to be a rare-grade medium-quality armament. Apart from absorbing and storing its wearer's mana, the bracelet's weight increases according to the amount absorbed. Sihan is informed that he can also use the skill known as Explosive Ring possessed by the bracelet. Sihan is pleased with the completion, while Yuna's stomach begins to growl the moment she lays her eyes on the bracelet. Sihan is confused when he turns around to see her salivation while clutching her stomach, trying to keep her cravings for devouring weapons and armament in check. A few moments later, Sihan was done crafting 4 bracelets in total from the heavy inkstone. Yuna is impressed that he was able to achieve a resonance phenomenon in the bracelets even though they look simple. However, Sihan is still not satisfied because the bracelets are not strong enough, but he hopes to achieve a set effect if used correctly. He apologizes to Yuna for not being able to give her an armament to consume as a gift for keeping him company throughout the process, but he hands her the scraps from the heavy ink rock to use as a palate cleanser. Without hesitation, Yuna grabs the bowl and activates her unique skill, Soul Smelting Furnace, which she uses to digest the scraps. After taking a few bites, she admits the scraps are quite edible and it even tastes like fried lamb chops. Sihan assumes it was an old habit from before his regression, when he catered to her tastes. He is happy that he might be able to raise Yuna's bond level with him since she's so easy to please. Despite getting the delicious scraps, Yuna's eyes continue to linger on the bracelets, which she assumes must be more delicious than mere scraps. Afterwards, she asks Sihan when he plans to sell the 5-color Fireblade and the Fire Accumulating Sheath. Sihan lets her know that he doesn't plan to sell them anytime soon, as he plans to use them during the freshman subjugation class. Besides, he intends to use them as bait to keep Yuna longing for more to allow himself to get closer to her. Sihan assures her that he will reach out once he has equipment worthy of her, and she reluctantly agrees to wait. Afterward, Yuna asks if he has finished smithing, and when he confirms that he is, she tells him to leave the cleanup to the staff. The suggestion comes as a relief because Sihan is already exhausted and doesn't have the strength left to clean up after himself. However, as is about to stand up, Sihan almost collapses, but Yuna quickly catches him before he hits the ground. She then checks up on him and Sihan tells her that he stood up too fast without distributing his stamina properly. Yuna offers to take him to his dorm and asks if he's afraid of heights. Sihan is about to respond that he's not when Yuna picks him up like a little puppy, leaving Sihan confused. Before he could react, she immediately jumped out the window and shot into the night sky with a terrified Sihan clutching tightly to her. Yuna is surprised that her power has increased so much just from eating the scraps she got from Sihan. At the same time, Sihan seems to be enjoying himself playing the damsel in distress, as he admits that everything has changed quite a bit from before his regression. Meanwhile, Erika stands outside Sihan's dorm in the freezing cold, waiting to give him an invitation. She sneezes from the bitter chill, suggesting she has been waiting for him there for quite some time. The following day, a photo of Erika standing outside the dormitory for more than 3 hours spreads across the internet, sparking widespread speculation about who she had been waiting for. Some commenters insist she must have been waiting for Sihan, while others immediately criticize them for jumping to conclusions. Several users call for the photo to be taken down altogether, arguing that it violates Erika's portrait rights. When Sihan comes across the post, he barely gives it a second thought and figures Erika would seek him out again if she has something important to tell him. Just then, an instructor named Ricaros Miles walks into the hall, announcing that he will be in charge of the Understanding Tools class. He tells the students to move to the training center, and the last person to arrive will run 20 laps around the track. He immediately heads back out as the students quickly rush out of the classroom. Sihan is puzzled because he thought this was supposed to be a theory class. He decides to put that thought aside for now and just run, but unfortunately, he was the last to react, and thanks to his terrible stamina, he's the last person to arrive. Miles orders him to run the 20 laps, and Sihan takes off immediately amidst the chatter from the other students mocking his stamina for being bottom tier. Some even begin to doubt that he truly passed the intermediate smithing properly. While Sihan is serving the punishment, Miles decides to start teaching the other students. He explains that the class was supposed to be strictly theory, but they decided to change it up to practical because of the recent flame blade hunt attacks, targeting blacksmiths who can craft hero-grade or higher fire attribute blades. Sihan overhears this while passing by and recalls that before his regression, the case about the flame blade hunter attacks remained unsolved. Miles tells the class that he will be teaching them techniques to protect themselves, while they also learn to understand tools, and the first tool they will be covering is the sword. While Sihan is running around, He is also listening in on the lesson and notes that he needs to raise his stamina in order to protect himself. Sihan immediately picks up speed using the ink spider bracelet he made earlier to enhance his stamina. He used the bracelet's explosive ring skill, which manipulates gravity within a 1 meter radius around the user. The bracelet also increases his stats by an average of 5. Sihan makes up his mind to improve his body before the end of his first year, no matter the cost. Just then, Miles tells him to stop running and join the class, so Sihan quickly turns off the explosive ring effect before heading over to join them. Seeing how Sihan is still in good shape, Miles notes that he is actually in better shape than he thought. He decides to check Sihan's swordsmanship and hands him a sword, telling him to just swing it. Sihan accepts the sword, but is worried it might be tough to move properly because of the ink spider bracelet. To offset that problem, he decides to use a crude sword technique from before his regression. He immediately strikes at Miles' back, but Miles blocks the attack with ease. The students mock Sihan for being too slow, though one admits that his form is actually quite good. Miles agrees, noting that Sihan's form is exceptional because his sword instinctively knows the path it must take. However, he points out that Sihan is far too hasty and decides to offer him some advice. Before he can finish that thought, Sihan suddenly gives him a terrifying glance, which spooks Miles, throwing him off guard. Sihan takes the opportunity to attack, and Miles is unable to react in time, causing him to lose the match. Miles stares at Sihan's blade on his neck in shock and can't believe that a glare from a first-year cadet scared him to the point of hallucinating. Miles demands to know who taught Sihan the swordsmanship style, but Sihan hesitates to respond because he learned this before his regression from a man who claimed to have created the technique in 10 minutes. Back then, Sihan crafted a weapon for some old dude who refused to pay him, so Sihan wanted to destroy the blade, but the man begged him and promised to teach him a technique in exchange for the payment. Since Sihan can't just say he learned it from his past life, he tells Miles that he learned it from watching online videos, which Miles finds ridiculous. Miles then asks if Sihan wants to properly learn swordsmanship and offers to write him a letter of recommendation for the body control lecture at the combat department. Later that day, Sihan heads to the combat department for the body control lecture, only to run into the old man from his past life who taught him that sword technique. He was a retired S-class hero and Sihan's regular customer, known as the Swordbreaker, Ma Guangsu. Sihan can't believe that the notorious gambler and drunkard he knew before his regression was actually a professor at Babel. Just then, Guangsu, who had been arguing with Jake earlier, notices Sihan watching them from the corner and asks who he is. Sihan steps forward to introduce himself and produces the letter of recommendation from Miles. Guangsu is surprised that Miles actually recommended someone while Jake whispers to him, telling him that Sihan is this year's technology department valedictorian. But after checking him closely, Guangsu feels that Sihan is too mediocre to be the valedictorian. He then turns to Jake, asking if he truly wants to learn from him. Jake eagerly responds that he wants to, so Guangsu agrees to teach him if he can defeat Sihan. A few moments later, the boys prepare to face off, and Guangsu announces that it will be a single match where the one who lands the first valid hit wins. Sihan chooses a wooden sword while Jake settles for his fist. As soon as Guangsu tells them to begin, he quietly observes the posture of the two boys. Seeing how frail yet relaxed Sihan looks, Guangsu wonders whether relaxation boosts his flexibility by removing strength from his body. Guangsu is instantly irritated when Jake takes a flashy pose just to intimidate Sihan before the fight begins. He complains that this is the very reason why he dislikes show-offs who focus on mind games instead of properly clashing with their opponent. While he is still complaining, Sihan swiftly charges towards Jake without his sword, but Jake tackles him before he can make his move. As the duo grapples with each other, Sihan quickly realizes that Jake is insanely strong, like a giant boulder. Despite that, he decides to show him the gap in their strength, and as Jake tackles him to the ground, Sihan activates the explosive ring. This causes Jake to lose his balance and stumble forward, falling face first into Sihan's fist. Dazed, Jake can hardly believe he actually lost, while Sihan grins triumphantly and asks if he was faster. After the duel, Guangsu barks at Jake to leave the room for losing, but Sihan stops him, arguing that Jake should be taught precisely because he was beaten. Guangsu then mocks Jake for losing to a refining department cadet before reluctantly agreeing to teach him. Jake is over the moon and humbly bows to thank him when Guangsu says he'll set the time for their training sessions. Afterwards, he tells Jake to leave so he can discuss something important with Sihan alone. Once Jake leaves, Guangsu tells Sihan to show him the sword technique he used to impress Miles. Sihan agrees and immediately charges forward with his wooden sword, but Guangsu instantly disarms him before he can strike. Guangsu then commends him for having a good concept but a crude execution. He explains that a swordsmanship that becomes weaker on the second execution isn't normal at all and curses the person who taught Sihun the style in the first place. Sihun almost bursts out laughing because Guangsu doesn't even know he's cursing himself. Guangsu tells Sihun that he will help him build a proper body around that abysmal technique, so Sihun takes it that he has been accepted into the body control class. Once Guangsu confirms it, Sihun pays his respects before taking his leave, causing Guangsu to mock him for being such a stiff. Outside the training room, Sihun is surprised when Jake suddenly approaches and hands him an invitation to Noblesse, a place where cadets from prestigious families gather. Looking at the invitation, Sihun wonders if Erica was also trying to give him the same invitation. Jake warns him that Noblesse has a lot of stuck-up Nipas there, but it would be a good opportunity for him to make connections. Sihun isn't sure he should accept the invitation, but Jake tells him that it is his way of showing gratitude to Sihun for helping him get into Guangsu's class. After thanking him, Sihun decides to take his leave, and on the way, he checks out his schedule for the minors he applied for, which are barrier composition and body control. He's about to start searching for a minor to enroll in the technology department when he bumps into a weird girl named Leah Claudel, who suddenly grabs his hand. The girl's eyes glisten as she demands to know if Sihun made the bracelet on his wrist. As soon as Sihun confirms that he made it, the girl offers to help him enchant the bracelet, and this instantly establishes a bond between them. Leah Claudel was a genius who raised an armaments grade by 2 whole ranks using enchantment, and even created a legendary armament. In the future, she's someone who would shatter the enchanter industry, but right now, she was just the usual overindulgent weirdo. A few moments later, Sihun and Leah settle in front of a shop where Leah can't stop fawning over the rare-grade heavy ink rock bracelets. She can't seem to figure out which formulas to enchant the bracelet with, and after considering for a while, Leah is frustrated while Sihun quietly sips his tea, calling her wacko in his mind. Seeing the frustrated look on her face, he asks if the armament is not to her liking, but Leah replies that it's perfect, except there's just too much she wants to do with it. Leah commends Sihun for making the bracelet's compatibility so good, even though it was made from heavy ink rock. It's mainly because of the excellent compatibility that she can't seem to figure out which formulas to insert, since there are so many she can choose from. Since she's struggling to make a choice, Sihun tells her not to worry because he has more bracelets for her to go crazy with. Leah is utterly blown away when he tells her to keep in mind that the bracelets have a resonance phenomenon. This prompts her to ask what type of monster Sihun is to have created such an insane armament. Sihun simply introduces himself as a first-year refining department cadet and the valedictorian of the technology department. Leah is amazed that a first-year student created such a masterpiece, after which she properly introduces herself as a third-year cadet from the enchantment department. Some dude who has been watching them from afar suddenly slams his hand on the table, demanding that Sihun speak to him privately. Sihun immediately recognizes the dude as Erika's lackey, while Leah scolds the dude for being rude and interrupting them, but he refuses to back down until Sihun agrees to talk to him for a moment. Sihun casually tells him to speak right there, and the dude smugly demands that Sihun apologize for being rude to Erika for tearing the invitation she gave him in public. Sihun lets the guy know that Erika was the one who asked him to tear it, but the dude doesn't want to see reason, especially since he knows about the new invitation Sihun received from Jake. As if fed up with the guy's trash talk, Sihun asks if Erika sent him to make trouble, but the dude states that he's acting on his own. However, Leah accuses him of being one of the many lackeys of the young master of the Inoue family, who just happens to be Erika's brother. Infuriated by her words, the dude calls Leah a washout as he unleashes powerful pressure to intimidate them while telling Sihun that there's nothing special about him. He also lets Sihun know that Babel has more than a dozen people superior to him. With a slight look of disgust, Sihun wonders if the guy is talking about himself, and this enrages the dude more as he angrily barks at Sihun to shut his trap. He then unleashes several ferocious mana beasts to attack them, but Sihun effortlessly dispels the attack and also notices that the dude used several daggers as an attack medium hidden inside the mana illusion. The dude is surprised as he wonders how Sihun saw through it, but Sihun refuses to explain and simply says he caught on because the attack sounded delicious. Activating the gluttony iron bond imprint he received from Mona, Sihun decides to put the dude in his place by seizing all his expensive daggers with the skill. The boy can only scream as he watches his expensive daggers being devoured by Sihun. After tasting the same sensations Ona feels whenever she tastes a weapon, Sihun admits he now knows why she goes crazy over them. The gluttony iron he got from bonding with Yunya has a high-grade, supreme quality. The iron creates heat energy by devouring iron, and it can also corrode the iron it touches and melt its core into its own interior. It basically relies on iron to create mineral blood. After seizing the daggers, Sihun activates Explosive Ring, swiftly dashing forward to punch the dude in the gut, completely defeating him. Afterwards, he asks Leah to recommend a suitable minor lecture in the enchantment department for him to enroll in. Leah is more than happy to oblige as she tells him to check out ancient enchanting, and also hypes herself up as an outstanding senior to learn from, making Sihan disgusted. Meanwhile, the dude who got beaten earlier is on his way back, wondering how a freshman like Sihan could possess such reaction speed when he runs into Erika in an alley nearby. She bluntly asks to look at the dagger in his hand, which seems like the only one he managed to get away with. The boy hands the dagger to her without hesitation, and Erika tells him not to report the altercation to her brother as she plans to speak to the family head about it. The boy agrees to her request, but Erika is too engrossed in studying the dagger, which she notices has an anti-theft enchantment engraved in it. It turns out that she observed the whole fight earlier and figured Sihan must have created a counterskill based on the magic he learned from her and Professor Robert's barrier composition. From what she witnessed earlier, Erika believes that Sihan's aptitude for smithing technology could be even higher than S grade, so she decides to adjust his magic evaluation aptitude to grade A. Elsewhere, Sihan is busy checking out the 6 daggers he looted from the sucker who attacked him earlier, when he is suddenly informed that a bond has been established with Erika. Sihan is confused because he didn't even do anything, but since this happened, he realizes she must have been secretly watching him fight earlier. Sihan is pleased with his gains for the day, although he's slightly disappointed he couldn't get the rest of the 10 blades missing in the set. Though he feels the blades are too crude to be used, Sihan figures they would be a perfect combination with the Black Spirit thread skill. At the same time, Inkyil was teaching in class, but Sihan wasn't paying him any attention because the class was awfully boring, even though he had been looking forward to the class. The theories Inkyil was teaching were the same old boring stuff he already knew from before regressing. After the long lecture, Inkyil announces that it's time to dive into the practical aspect of metal deformation. He then demonstrates by showing them how the form of a specific metal changes completely, depending on how the mana arrangement is modified. Inkyil changes the same metal into several forms, telling them that the application of metal deformation determines the versatility of a weapon. After the demonstration, Inkyil returns the metals to their original form and tells the students that, as blacksmiths, they must fully understand the potential of the metal they're handling. Inkyil then announces that everyone will be practicing what he just demonstrated for them. His assistant Han distributes the metal ingots to the class, while Inkyil gives them step-by-step guidance on how to proceed. He then warns them to handle the metal ingots carefully since they have been adjusted to react sensitively to deformation. After explaining the process, Inkyil gives them 10 minutes to produce results and tells the class to begin. Unfortunately, he's not impressed with the whole class botching the practicals except for Hans and Sihan, who turned it into a competition and finished almost at the same time. Inkyil announces that they can both move on to the next stage and shows them the metal ingot they'll be using next. As soon as Hans picks it up, he notes that the speed and method components are similar to the first one, so he is certain he can win against Sihan. Inkyil then shows them the complicated arrangement they need to apply to the metal, and Hans successfully pulls it off on the first try before Sihan. He even wants to perfect it so that everyone can praise him, but Inkyil suddenly calls him sternly, telling him to return the iron ingots to their original form. Though taken aback by the request, Hans immediately tries to revert the metal to its original form, but he is unable to do so because the mana arrangement on the iron was already completely ruined before they began. Inkyil explains that the iron couldn't withstand deformation because the processing method was wrong from the start. Hans argues that he followed Inkyil's instruction to the letter, but Inkyil reminds him that he was supposed to perfectly understand the potential of the metal before starting the experiment. He further adds that once the ingot cannot be restored, the manipulated arrangement becomes deteriorated and not deformed. This, in turn, can significantly compromise the quality and performance of the equipment produced. Inkyil then advises Hans to carefully review and identify where things went wrong to prevent similar issues in the future, and Hans acknowledges his advice. Hans hopes he isn't the only one who didn't notice the flaw on the iron ingots, but to his shock, Sihan successfully returns the deformed iron to its original form. The whole class, including Inkyil, is stunned that Sihan actually pulled it off. Inkyil tells Sihan to show him again the technique he just used, and it dawns on Sihan that he might have gone too far showing off his skills. To keep things low-key, Sihan quickly lies that what he did would have been impossible to do with a standard iron ingot, but he luckily found a way around the flaw because the iron ingots have been specially adjusted. Inkyil falls for this lie and truly believes that Sihan did it because the iron was already sensitive due to the adjustment. He even blames himself for not noticing this on time. What he doesn't know is that Sihan used the deformation formula created by the greatest blacksmith, a summit climber named Lee Kens, also known as the Saint of the Holy Fire. Kens created it during his days as an S-rank hero, and it hasn't been disproven for decades. This deformation formula is the core of all blacksmiths, and it is called the truth of iron. Afterwards, Sihun heads back to his seat, hoping that he completely fooled Inkyul. At the same time, Inkyul is beginning to suspect that what Sihun just did isn't some random fluke. A few moments later, Inkyul dismisses the class, but tells Sihun to hang back for a moment. Inkyul then gives him a red ore as an admission gift for choosing to stay in Babel. The red ore is a high-quality, rare-grade crimson fire jade. It contains the essence of the crimson flame and possesses the ability to melt mixed ores into liquid. Inkyul tells Sihun that absorbing the essence of the ore can help him strengthen his crimson flame. He apparently prepared it after hearing that Sihun can handle crimson flame. Pleased with the gift, Sihun happily thanks Inkyul, who then asks if he plans on enrolling in one of his minor courses. Sihun asks if he's referring to armament fundamental studies, while Inkyul counters with a question, asking if Sihun knows anything about the course. Sihun confirms that he does. After all, it is the class with one of the largest budgets supported by Babel. However, Sihun isn't certain he wants to get entangled with Inkyul because, before regressing, he never heard Inkyul's name on any notable later achievements, meaning he must have met a tragic end. But after considering it, Sihun decided to go with the flow, since Inkyul is currently receiving a lot of attention. He then tells Inkyul that he would be taking the course, but Inkyul worries that Sihun's schedule might be too packed since he has already picked quite a few minors. Sihun says it wouldn't be a problem since he only picked 4 other courses, including this one. As the two men shake on the beginning of their partnership, Sihun is able to form a level 1 bond contract with Inkyul. The ore extracted from the bond is a high-grade flame-bearing iron with mid-low quality. Although this ore contains flames, at the same time, it possesses properties similar to wood and can store flames inside. Later that day, Sihun attempts to forge and process his body since he can extract metal from others. It is already common knowledge that multiple mana attributes within the body cause conflict and can be fatal for a blacksmith who requires precision when forging. Normally, people with multiple attributes only use one that best suits their aptitude. However, Sihun believes he is different and plans to forge his body to be able to handle multiple attributes without any fatal conflicts between them. First, he makes sure that the internal mana in his body is adequately depleted, and once his body is drained of mana, he draws in the essence of the crimson jade. Sihun then constructs a mana circuit solely for the crimson flame inside his body, and smelts the crimson jade ore within his body. As the flame explodes through the new pathways, Sihun is informed that his mana attributes have been strengthened, and his crimson flame levels up from F rank to E+ rank. He also acquired an S-grade skill called Spirit Body Smithing Magic because he smithed new internal mana circuits in his body. Apart from enhancing his strength, the process also increases his physical abilities and all his stats due to the new skill effect. This suddenly reminds him of his master's words, urging him to make use of the materials available to him instead of giving up without even considering how to work with them. Inspired by this memory, Sihun resolves to make use of everything within his reach. Having been burdened by regret in his previous life, he swears not to repeat the same mistakes, whether facing an ally or an enemy. A few days later, during refining class, Han informs everyone that all the items made during the last few classes will be completed today. He explains that this is because the finished products are scheduled to be supplied within the school and externally. He also lets them know that whatever they make today somehow determines the course of their entire semester, so he urges them to do their best and leave no regrets behind. The students acknowledged his advice and immediately began hammering away like their lives depended on it. As usual, Sihun isn't impressed by his own work, which he feels has a lot of misalignment because of his poor stamina. Refusing to take the easy way out, he continues to hammer away until he's satisfied with the result. Since he can't make several excellent weapons due to the time constraints, Sihun plans to focus on making at least one impressive weapon. He could try to finish everything to a moderate standard and use them to get more budget from Babel, but Sihun only wants one excellent weapon, which he hopes will make up for the rest. While polishing the sword, he begins to hear the sound of those familiar waves from the perishing sea. It was the sound of the world ending, and before his regression, every time Sihun heard this sound, he created exceptional items. Just as expected, Sihun completed the white light longsword, which possesses an edge engraved into the body of the blade itself, not a temporary sharpness. For drawing out the material's potential to forge a new edge, Sihun acquired a new C-rank skill named White Light Style. The White Light longsword was a high-quality, rare-grade weapon with a pure white edge forged into it. The blade interlocks with the mana arrangement, possessing a tough yet sharp edge, and its cutting power is enhanced when mana is imbued into the sword. Despite how awesome the White Light longsword sounds, Sihun is still not completely satisfied with the results even though he made it using normal iron. However, he was comforted by the fact that his skills from before the regression were slowly returning to him. At the same time, The other students are also disappointed in their terrible work, and some even consider switching to a different career path. The following day was the weekend, so Sihun decided to use the free time to see Leah's enchanting skills. He was also curious about her basic skills, but their usual joint was too crowded, so Leah suggested going to her secluded workshop. But Sihun later discovered that the workshop is located too far away from civilization. A few moments later, they arrive at the workshop, which also doubles as a hardware store for the combat department. Upon entering, Leah loudly calls out to her grandmother, Helena, who turns out to be way too young to be anyone's grandma. Leah finds it ridiculous when Helena asks if Sihun is her boyfriend. After denying it, she introduces him as this year's technology department's valedictorian. But Helena is instantly disappointed that they picked such a weak-looking dude. After proper introductions between Helena and Sihun, Helena barks at Leah to get to work. She explains that work has piled up this week because of the new freshman. Leah agrees to do as she's told and shows Sihun the way to the workshop. After scanning around the workshop, Sihun admits that Helena's skills are better than he thought. He can't seem to understand why she was hiding away in a rundown hardware store like this with such skills. As Leah prepares to begin work, she shows Sihun an enchant palette filled with powders made by grinding magic stones. Usually the standard enchantment palette is 8 colors, but Leah's has over a dozen diverse colors. Sihun then asks Leah if her job is just to restore damaged enchantment formulas with the palette. Leah confirms this and adds that she enjoys doing it because she can make money while enchanting to her heart's content without worrying about the material costs. She then begins to enchant a magic formula behind a flat pan. Sihun hasn't said anything yet, but the truth is that he came because Leah seemed to be having something similar to an artist's block. During their last meeting, Erica's lackey called Leah a has-been who fails every exam and couldn't even protect her seat as the department valedictorian. By observing her work in real time, Sihun quickly identifies both the cause of her slump and the solution to it. He admits that Leah is very talented as she becomes completely immersed in drawing enchantments that she does not even notice him slipping away to inspect the workshop. Sihun stumbles upon a whetstone for sharpening and notes that they resonate with the mana arrangement to grant a special effect. It had been a while since he did anything meaningful with the white light longsword, so he was itching to test out the whetstone. Just then, Helena appears behind him and tells him to try using the stone if he can. She gestures to a pile and tells him to pick out anything from it to work with. Sihun doesn't like how Helena is trying to boss him around, but is not about to miss out on the opportunity to test such a special quality whetstone. From the pile of hardware, Sihun chooses a worn-out kitchen knife, which surprises Helena. From how evenly worn out the blade is, Sihun notes that the knife must have been used by someone who knows how to handle a sword, which makes it the perfect choice to test out on the special whetstone. Sihun believes that the whetstone should be able to properly fix the knife even if he sharpens the edge to its limit. Helena is amazed as Sihun begins to sharpen the blade, and from his skills she finds it hard to believe that he's just a freshman. Meanwhile, Leah, who is so engrossed in enchanting her pans, suddenly screams in excitement that she is done. It was at that moment that she actually noticed that Helena was even in the room. She then joins her to watch Sihun work and teases Helena for initially looking down on Sihun and finally being slapped in the face with his true potential. Embarrassed, Helena barks at Leah to shut it, and at that moment, Sihun completes fixing the kitchen knife. As usual, he is not impressed with his work and promises to do better next time, but Helena is too pissed with the smug look of genius on his face, so she hurries them to leave. As Leah pushes him out, Sihun can't help but wonder why the old lady is suddenly cranky. Once they leave, Helena quietly stares at the kitchen knife until some dude barges in calling her sister. He then asks her about his kitchen knife, and Helena scolds him for still working in a restaurant when he's supposed to be a professor of the combat department. The man tells her to stop nagging about his hobby and heads into the store to pick up the knife by himself. He is surprised when he sees the knife and asks if Helena sharpened it herself. Helena tells him she didn't, so he figures it must be one of the store assistants, but Helena lets him know that it was done by a freshman. The man is stunned to hear this as he begins to wonder who this talented freshman is. Meanwhile, Sihun asks Leah if Helena was a former professor at the refining department. Leah confirms that she was and explains that Helena retired 5 years ago and opened the hardware store close to the combat department. Sihun wonders whether there's some special story behind her retirement, but Leah says it wasn't anything special. She tells him that a lot of professors have left the refining department in the last 10 years. Sihun notes that this isn't something he can ignore anymore because the refining department will become the weakest in Babel in the future. Leah then asks Sihun for his opinion on her enchantment, and he tells her that it was decent enough. Leah is about to start celebrating when Sihun bursts her bubbles by scolding her for being too narrow-minded. He points out that she already had better methods in mind but didn't use them. Leah is surprised to hear this as she wonders how he could possibly know what is on her mind. Sihun then admonishes her for not being able to perform properly despite knowing the means to. He points out that this is a major problem because a creator's imagination is their greatest weapon. Yet Leah found a way to suppress hers. Displeased by the criticism, Leah firmly tells Sihun that she is not suppressing her creativity just because she wants to. Sihun ignores her pity party and pulls out a blade to help her break through the block. He tells her to pay attention because he doesn't have the luxury of time to spoon feed her. Using the process of smithing, Sihun begins to properly explain the basics of enchanting to her. Sihun explains that creating a stone and placing it underwater is kind of like smithing, while carving an image of the submerged stone onto the surface of the water is enchanting. This is the reason why enchanting takes on the nature of a dream. He then infuses the dagger with crimson flame and uses the white light style to engrave a white sharp edge on its blade while Leah watches in awe. Sihun goes on to explain that enchantment is not just something done on the surface, but a reinforcement beneath the surface of the armament. As he aims the blade at a tree, Sihun tells Leah to divide the layers if one layer isn't enough. He then throws the blade and it cuts through, neatly burrowing itself inside the trunk. Sihun explains that dividing the layers causes the sharpness to flow down along the current of the crimson flame. After the lecture, he hopes Leah can understand what he means, even though his demonstration can't be considered proper enchantment. However, since Leah is a genius, Sihun believes that with her talent she can find a new path within his demonstration, and just as he expected, Leah soon figures it out after considering it for only a second. She frantically begs him to lend her the dagger from earlier and excitedly promises to return it after testing out her ideas. Sihun agrees to give it to her without hesitation and even hands over the rest of the daggers. Leah is over the moon when she receives it, as if the absolute love of her life just gave her the most expensive bouquet. Before Sihun can react, she vanishes completely, forgetting he even exists in the first place. Because of their interaction, Sihun is able to form a level 1 bond with Leah. A few days later, Sihun heads to the training grounds, where he looks forward to meeting one of the 3 mad dogs from his past life. This tournament was a battle between the mad dog and the demon god of extinguishing light in their youth. At the same time, Erica sticks to Sihun like an annoying piece of gum, making him uncomfortable. When he asks what she's doing, Erica, like a creep, whispers that she's following him. Sihun then asks what she would do if he tells her to back off, and Erica lets him know that she will certainly obey his wishes, since she can just watch him from a little further away. However, Sihun doesn't stop her from sticking to him, and as their bodies brush against each other, a social link stone is formed from his bond with Erica. It was a low mid-quality, high-grade artificial or containing compressed tuned mana. When mixed with other materials, the ore can adjust the disorganized internal mana arrangement. At the same time, Sihun's bond with Leah, the complex bloom, is also extracted and it is of high-grade top quality. The complex blast bloom is a colorful or mixed with various colors, and is an exceptional amplifier that draws out the potential of mixed materials to the limit. Before long, the host takes the stage to welcome everyone to the Martial Arts Hall's ranking battle tournament. The host turns out to be a young girl named Ran Fang, the youngest professor of the martial arts department in charge of the tournament's commentary. She then introduces the first player, Arya Myers, fourth-year combat department valedictorian and the next head of the Myers family. Arya was Jake's older sister, and the Myers family is one of the top families that have consistently produced S-class heroes. Arya is known for being a perfect superhuman who has maintained her position as the Martial Arts Hall's #1 for 3 consecutive years now. She is currently an active A-class hero and sword saint who succeeded in climbing the peak of the Tower of Heroes. The moment Ran announces Arya, the crowd erupts in an explosive cheer for her, except for Sihun and Erica. Ran then introduces the first player challenging Arya, who happens to be the successor of the Flame Wheel Embers pair. He was the Spear Arts Department's 3rd-year valedictorian and 10th ranked in the Martial Arts Hall. Sihun breaks into a smile as he instantly recognizes Yom Songha, that familiar mad dog from before his regression. As soon as Shuha takes the stage, a fierce battle ensues between him and Arya. Songha uses a flame spear while Arya uses a thin longsword with light attributes. Songha struggles to keep up while Arya effortlessly breezes through with a smile on her face. Even with one hand tucked away behind her, Songha soon realizes that is no match for Arya. From observing their exchange, Sihun can tell that Songha is fighting below standard despite his young age. This makes him wonder if Songha isn't receiving support as the successor of the Flame Wheel Embers pair. However, the major thing bothering Sihun is Songha's terrible spear. Just as Songha is about to charge forward to attack Arya, her longsword suddenly points toward his neck, taking him by surprise. Without wasting any time, he admits that he lost, and Arya, still wearing that smile, amends him for doing his best. Ran then declares Arya as the winner and announces that the two players will be interviewed shortly. But before she can finish speaking, Seungha walks out of the arena, so Ran decides to exclude him from the interview session. Arya gladly takes the opportunity to farm adoration from the audience with her pretentious smile, while Seungha quietly walks away from the spotlight. Seeing how upset he looks, Sihun decides to head out to meet him. Erika asks him about watching the rest of the match, but Sihun lets her know that he isn't interested. Before leaving, he casually remarks that Arya is too unpleasant to watch. Even though she would prefer not to be away from him, Erika is still relieved that Sihun won't be there to watch her older brother, but she can't seem to understand why he's suddenly pissed. Just then, Arya turns around to glance at them and notes that she might have found an interesting freshman. A few moments later, Sihun finds Seungha seated on the floor in a park somewhere near the martial arts hall. Sihun is relieved that he's still alive because even with his dog-like personality back then, he was a pillar of the Death Squad. He was also the one who ultimately sacrificed his life just to defeat the demon god of the Sea of Extinction. Since Seungha hasn't become the twisted guy from his past life, Sihun hopes he can obtain a bondstone from him more smoothly this time. Seungha already noticed his presence and asked if Sihun watched the spar between her and Arya earlier. Sihun confirms that he did, and Seungha admits that he must be quite skilled to have found him so quickly. The moment he turns around, Seungha recognizes Sihun as the refining department's valedictorian and questions why he is there. Sihun is a bit taken aback because he wasn't expecting Seungha to react so strongly against him. He then reveals that he just wants to talk, but Seungha sternly warns him to leave. Sihun tries to explain that their talk is for his benefit, but Seungha cuts him off, declaring that he hates weaklings who can't do anything on their own, especially those who think having a little skill puts them on his level. He then calls Sihun a blacksmith in a condescending tone, telling him to leave no matter what he wants to say. Though surprised by his rudeness, Sihun admits that Seungha is much more polite compared to his Mad Dog days. But with his current attitude, he knows that words alone cannot get through to him, so Sihun decides to use force. Sensing his intentions, Seungha decides to humor him to put him in his place. But instead of just attacking him, Sihun provokes Seungha by declaring that the Flame Will Embers pair will end because of him. Infuriated by the remark, Seungha swiftly tries to punch him, but Sihun uses Gluttony Iron from Yunya's bond to deflect the attack. Seungha is stunned that the so-called weakling actually deflected his mana-imbued punch, but this makes him admit that Sihun did indeed deserve the right to speak to him from the start. However, he was not about to admit that openly. Besides, the trajectory of his flame ember still lingers, so Seungha refuses to back down. He decides to show Sihun the true power of the Flame Wheel Embers pair by ending the fight in one move. Seungha unleashes the powerful mana ember on him, but Sihun somehow deflects it by stealing the flame. Seungha is stunned as he tries to figure out why the ember that should only react to his mana is in Sihun's hand. He wonders if Sihun dismantled and stole it, but that doesn't stop him from striking again. However, Sihun easily evades the attack. As Seungha's aura suddenly shifts and grows increasingly violent, Sihun realizes that the Mad Dog is truly about to lose control. It then occurs to him that Seungha's explosive personality was likely the reason behind the Flame Flower Gate massacre incident. In the next instant, Seungha charges forward in a blind rage to end Sihun. Realizing that any chance of a peaceful resolution has vanished, and with both the effects of Gluttony Iron and his body nearing their limits, Sihun decides it is time to bring out his trump card. Just as Seungha is about to land the devastating punch, a hand suddenly intercepts the attack, and unexpectedly, it is none other than Jake Myers. Seungha is surprised to see him and wonders if Jake knows Sihun personally. While still trembling from the impact of blocking such a powerful attack, Jake confirms that he knows Sihun. Afterwards, Seungha tells them to leave, and Jake gladly pushes a reluctant Sihun away from the crazy dude. Sihun tells Seungha to remember his words, but before he can finish speaking, Jake fearfully cuts him off, telling him to just keep moving. After they leave, Seungha can't help but sulk in regret for losing control to the point of almost tarnishing the reputation of the Flame Wheel Ember Spear and causing trouble for his master. Still, he can't seem to stop thinking about Sihun and what he said. Meanwhile, Jake scolds Sihun for picking a fight with a senior and mentions that Sihun would have been toast if he hadn't stepped in to block that punch. Sihun scoffs at him, saying there's no way he could have died even without Jake's help. Just then, Sihun receives a notification that a bond has been established between him and Seungha, prompting him to look forward to extracting it. However, he is unsure of what to expect since the Seungha before his regression was a complete mad dog, whereas the younger Seungha seems too soft. As a result, Sihan suspects that the effects of the bondstone may be different from what he remembers. Sihan also plans to find more ways to raise his bond level with Seungha. Putting that aside for now, he decides to focus on Jake, who seems like someone useful to befriend. Sihan then asks about his hand, and Jake cheerfully assures him that his hand is quite tough, which Sihan finds interesting. Jake then asks Sihan what he said about his sister Arya at the arena, and Sihan simply says he called her a stuck-up beach. Jake is shocked when he hears this, as he realizes that must be why Arya was asking him all sorts of questions about Sihan. He then lets Sihan know that Arya has taken a keen interest in him. Sihan is surprised that Arya overheard his comment, despite the deafening noise in the martial arts hall. Jake quietly warns him to keep his voice down, explaining that Arya is an A-rank hero with exceptionally sharp hearing. Unfazed, Sihan casually remarks that he welcomes her interest in him, though Jake cannot understand why he would consider that something to be proud of. In reality, Sihan welcomes the attention because of Seungha. Since Seungha is interested in defeating Arya, getting closer to his rival could help secure Seungha's focus on him. Jake then warns Sihan not to take Arya's interest lightly, but he can't seem to find the word to describe how terrifying his sister can be, so Sihan helps him by describing her as petty and insidious. Sihan's description of Arya spooks Jake as he scans the area, fearing that she might be listening to them at that very moment. He then asks why Sihan seems to loathe his sister, but Sihan doesn't respond because he's the only one who knows that the so-called Sword Saint will one day be tempted by the power of the demon gods. After his regression, Arya suddenly vanished, only to reappear as the demon god of extinguishing light. She abandoned her sword and made the remains of a demon god her sword. Sihan couldn't tell Jake all this, so he simply explained that he dislikes Arya because her face spells trouble. Thinking about Arya ruined his mood, so he abruptly walked away, leaving Jake wondering why his mood had suddenly shifted. The moment Sihan leaves, Jake receives a message from Arya, asking him to keep tabs on his new friend. It was almost as if she knew they had been together the entire time. Frustrated, Jake realizes that Arya is trying to use him as a bridge to establish a connection with Sihan. Before he can even refuse a request, another message arrives, but this time Arya casually reminds him that she is fully aware of Sihan calling her petty and insidious. The subtle warning leaves Jake completely spooked with no room to object. The following morning at the lecture hall, Sihan was feeling sore all over from pushing himself too hard during his clash with Seongha. Suddenly, a dwarf professor barges into the hall riding a tiny recycle bin. The professor introduces himself as Reese Nova, who will be in charge of their major classes for the next 2 weeks and also teach them attribute refining. However, the class doesn't seem excited to see Reese because he's infamously known for being a lunatic. Before starting, Reese announces that he will be distributing the results for last week's major refining assignment and their individual budget for the first semester. He calls them to step forward one by one to receive it, and the last person on the list is Sihan. The moment Sihan is called, everyone begins to wonder how much he will be getting since he has been outstanding so far. However, Reese announces that Sihan's budget has not been released yet. Sihan is puzzled to hear this, and Reese explains that it was withheld because the completion level of his submission was too high. Apparently, the faculty unanimously agreed to enter Sihan's last submission into the upcoming second-year public auction happening in a few days. Reese further explains that Sihan's budget will be determined by the winning bid at the auction. Sihan immediately suspects that this is another attempt by Michael to sabotage him. However, he decides to go along with it since Inkyul, who is on his side, would have objected if the decision were problematic. Reese then begins his lecture on residual mana and invites Seongha, who volunteered to assist him with the demonstration as a temporary assistant. Excited chatter erupts in the hall as soon as Seongha walks into the room, but Reese quiets them down to begin the theory before moving on to the practical aspect. He then begins to explain that residual mana in the creation of armaments is divided into 2 types, the basic charging type and the independent type, which generate their own mana or absorb it from the atmosphere. They both have their own pros and cons, but the independent type has a much greater difficulty because the method of constructing a mana core differs depending on various things such as materials, techniques, and the creator's mana. Reese announces that they'll be starting with the charging type first and calls on Seongha to begin the demonstration. Seongha then activates his fire attribute mana, which Reese explains is difficult to utilize as residual mana because it is highly volatile. However, suppressing its volatile nature shows excellent retention, which is exactly the technique Seongha uses to display 3-mana flame wheel, Ember's Pair. Even Hans is amazed that Seongha can precisely control fire attribute mana to that extent. After the demonstration, Reese tells the class to submit their assignments by next Thursday. He then displays the theme there to follow, which is fire attribute mana, charging residual mana, and flame wheel. They are told to make whatever they want, but maintain the 3 themes. Afterwards, Reese orders everyone to change their clothes and move to the refining room. As soon as the class ends, the students rush to the stage to seize the opportunity to talk to Seongha with hands at the center. However, Seongha bluntly tells them to get lost, making them feel like absolute trash. Sehun is the only one who completely ignores him, prompting Seongha to call out to him and ask what he knows about him. Sehun reveals that he knows that the proficiency of the flame wheel embers pairs is determined by the number of flame wheels. Currently, Lee Won-ryong, the current leader of the Flame Flower Gate and an A-rank hero, has reached 8 flame wheels. Seeing that Seongha could effortlessly maintain 3 wheels, Sehun guesses he must be able to maintain 6. Now, Seongha is interested in what Sehun has to say, so he chases after him and Sehun reveals that Seongha actually reached the 7th wheel. From Seongha's reaction, it is clear that Sehun was right, and Sehun then goes further to reveal that Seongha can no longer maintain 7 flame wheels anymore. Seongha wonders how Sehun uncovered his secret since he only told the sect leader about it. Sehun explains that thanks to his talent for handling fire, he was able to tell that something was wrong with Seongha's flame wheels. He noticed that Seongha couldn't handle his remaining power properly, and it was as if he was letting his flames run erratically. Seongha then asks if Sehun knows why it happened, and to his surprise, Sehun reveals that he has an idea why. However, he refuses to tell him, leaving Seongha disappointed. Determined to do anything to solve his predicament, Seongha tells Sehun to state his demand. Sehun makes 2 demands, and the first one is that Seongha must pay a fair price for his advice and help, while the second is that he must consult Sehun if any difficult decision arises. After stating his demands, Sehun tells him to decide before they reach the refining room. Without hesitation, Seongha accepts the offer, but on the condition that Sehun shows him proof. The students begin to gossip about Sehun for crafting without even drawing a blueprint. To make matters worse, Sehun throws a fire attribute or in a 7-to-3 ratio into the forge. Someone warns him that recklessly throwing them all in at the same time will cause the attribute mana to dissipate. However, Sehun ignores their doubts and keeps applying heat until the attribute mana begins to leak out. He then puts on gloves and shoves his hand close to the flames to simultaneously control the flame and mana to make it retain the attribute mana. Sehun's technique is called thermal substitution, and Reese is surprised that Sehun is already skilled enough to do this, making him realize there was a good reason why Inkyul accepted the public auction submission. However, Sehun had other plans for using thermal substitution, and this was to show Seongha the proof he wanted. To others, it was a simple technique, but Sehun is certain that the scenery is different for Seongha. He then signals for Seongha to watch closely as he pumps the flame, causing the fire attribute mana outward to be placed inside, and the dark attribute mana inward is placed outside. This way, a balance is maintained between the 2 opposing attributes, allowing a perfect flame circle to be drawn. Without any explanation whatsoever, Seongha figures out what Sehun was trying to show him as the cause and solution of his slump. For so long, Seongha had been suppressing his dark mana attribute, which was forbidden because it was considered an obstacle to the flame wheel embers pair. Soon afterwards, Seongha tried it according to Sehun's demonstration, but unfortunately, he dropped to the 5th wheel. He managed to complete 5 of the black flame wheels, but he didn't have the strength for the 6th one. Despite that, Sehun is impressed because 5 black flame wheels are actually stronger than 7 normal flame wheels. However, Seongha is still worried because the Flame Flower Gate periodically sends instructors to check the skills of the successors who are out in the world, and a successor who falls below 6 wheels will be stripped of their position as heir. Sehun tells Seongha to just keep practicing it like he did today, but Seongha reveals that he can't because his dark mana attribute can no longer be controlled. To make matters worse, an instructor from the sect was coming in tomorrow to oversee Seongha's assessment. Sehun is frustrated to hear this because Seongha will be automatically expelled if he loses his successor position. After briefly considering it for a moment, he finally figures out a method that can be used to improve Seongha's flame wheels in just 1 day. At first, Sehun wants to know if Seongha can do anything if he were to help him protect his position as heir. Seongha confidently assures him that he can, and this makes Sehun determined to help him. To do this, he extracts Seongha's red, resonant black bondstone, which is a high-grade stone of the best quality. Inside the ore, fire, and dark attribute mana coexist, and the wavelength created by the 2 attributes resonates with internal mana. Sehun then declares that the next part is to change Seongha's weapon. A few moments later, Seongha leads Sehun to the combat department's private training room, reserved exclusively for the top 100 rankers in the martial arts hall or the top 30 students in the department. The view in the room can even be adjusted to suit one's preference, and Seongha changes it to look like the Flame Flower Gate sect. Sehun teases him, asking if he's homesick, but Seongha explains that his master sent it to him, so he occasionally uses it. Sehun then begins making the makeshift training weapon by slicing the bondstone with mana and attaching each half to 2 short spears. Seongha is worried he can't handle 2 spears, but Sehun assures him that this is most suited for properly handling the fire and dark attributes. He then advises Seongha to create a flame wheel with his left hand and release dark attribute mana with his right hand. Seongha finds the instruction to simply release his dark attribute confusing, but Sehun assures him that it is exactly what he needs to do. Trusting his judgment, Seongha follows the advice and begins circulating his energy as instructed. However, he encounters a blockage in his left spear, which Sehun explains is because Seongha unconsciously channeled his dark attribute into his left hand, disrupting the flow. Basically, it is natural for multiple attributes to mix and come out without any blockage, but it is different for Seongha, whose 2 attributes are so messy that they hold each other back. Sehun figures it must be because Seongha has been suppressing the dark attribute for too long. He believes that Seongha will be able to reach the 6th wheel in no time once he gets used to handling both mana attributes at the same time. Sehun also gives him one of his ink spider bracelets to wear while practicing, which Seongha praises. After 3 hours of relentless training, Sehun feels relieved that Seongha has quickly adapted to using the 2 attributes. He assumes this rapid progress is likely because this training method originated from Seongha's future self. Sehun quietly observes him, comparing him to the Seongha he knew before the regression. He studies his breathing patterns, muscle movements, the shifts in his center of gravity, and the wavelength of mana circulating through his body before being released through the tip of the spear. Seongha eventually notices Sehun staring intently at him and asks why. Sehun simply replies that he is collecting data to make a suitable weapon for Seongha. However, before Seongha can celebrate, Sehun lets him know that he's actually making the weapon as part of Professor Ree's assignment. Seongha scoffs as he lets Sehun know that he could never have expectations for an armament made by a first-year cadet. Sehun then asks him the reason why he must maintain his position as the sect successor. Seongha says it's simply because his master wants him to become the sect leader, so he will follow his master's will as a devoted disciple. Seongha's master, Yom Jin-hyun, was the one who adopted him when he was an orphan and cared for him. Jin-hyun was an S-class hero and the first sect leader of the Flameflower Gate sect, but he retired due to an injury. Even though he has lost his real power in the sect, Sehun figures that Jin-hyun must still exert influence over Seongha as a guardian and master. He imagines that getting close to Jin-hyun will help him raise their bond level to the 3rd stage. Seongha eventually interrupts his daydreaming and asks why Sehun is helping him. Sehun is doing this to conquer the 6 great demon realms, which have turned into places swallowed by the swamp of pandemonium and now teeming with demonic beasts. After considering this for a moment, he bluntly tells Seongha that he needs people to protect him as he plans to enter the demon realm. He also explains that he needs materials to make weapons for these protectors. Sehun feels that if Seongha becomes the next sect leader, his skills and financial standing should be decent enough to help him achieve his goals. Seongha is instantly repulsed by Sehun's materialistic reason, but Sehun doesn't care for charity work since they haven't even known each other for long. Since the demand is basically transactional, Seongha firmly asks Sehun to help him become the next sect leader. In exchange, he promises to follow Sehun into the 6 great demon realms. This request immediately reminds Sehun that Seongha also made a similar request in the previous life, but that time it was for Sehun to make him a weapon. Seongha promised to kill the demon gods in exchange, and he kept his promise at the cost of his life. As Sehun retrieves the red resonant bondstone, he reassures Seongha that he will not regret this decision. He then activates the stone, vowing to make Seongha the sect leader even if Seongha comes to resent it. The following day, Gang Hyeonun, the 7th wheel instructor from Flameflower Gate, arrived at the Flavium 1st floor of the public training hall as scheduled for Seongha's successor assessment. Hyeonun also brought a couple of disciples selected by the sect leader to broaden their horizons by watching the match between Hyeonun and Seongha. Hyeonun sarcastically mentions that Seongha is the most outstanding successor after the next sect leader, but Seongha sternly warns her to watch her mouth because the next sect leader hasn't been decided. Hyeonun quickly apologizes while chuckling as if she didn't know that she said something stupid. She then asks if they can start the assessment, but Seongha refuses and demands the 7th wheel promotion instead. Hyeonun curses Seongha in her mind for being a fool, daring to covet the sect leader's seat. Hyeonun isn't worried about his request because Won Ryong, the current leader, already gave her the go-ahead to deal with Seongha if he challenges the 7th wheel. First, Hyeonun tries to talk him out of the challenge and even uses his sick adoptive father as an excuse, but Seongha tells her to stop babbling and get down to business. He then uses reverse psychology to taunt Hyeonun for being afraid to lose her position as instructor if she loses the duel to him. Infuriated by the disrespect, Hyanon immediately orders her subordinates to bring her spear. She then announces that the 7th wheel promotion will be a domain sparring match, which is a simple contest of strength where the person with the strongest flame will wins. Also, the condition for Seongha to be promoted is that either he wins or the match ends in a draw between them. As soon as Hyanon declares that the match can begin, Seongha pulls out his cool new gear, a dual short red and black spear made by Sihun. Hyanon isn't impressed and even mocks him for settling for such crude weapons. But Seongha shows off his red and dark flame attributes pouring out from each spear. Hyanon reminds him that he's supposed to be suppressing his dark attribute, as such messy flames will not be recognized as a flame wheel. Since the strength of their wheels will be determined when they clash, Seongha doesn't care what she thinks as he uses the mix of both attributes to form 7 perfect rings. Infuriated, Hyanon forms her own flame attribute wheels as she declares that she will make him regret this. Before long, their flame wheels clash, and Hyanon watches in utter horror as her wheels are being torn apart by Seongha's dark attribute. Once they're completely devoured, her spear begins to crack and instantly falls apart right before her eyes. Unable to say a word, she crumbles to her knees, completely overwhelmed, while Seongha smugly reminds her how she called his spear crude. Afterwards, Seongha asks Seongha what happens next, and Seongha explains that a promotion ceremony will be held soon, and he will be recognized as an instructor of the Flame Flower Gate and the official successor. Seongha wonders how one can become the sect leader. Seongha explains that there are 2 conditions to be met, and the first is reaching 8 wheels, while the second condition is to obtain consent from the majority of the instructors. Seonghan doubts the second condition can actually be met, but Seongha reminds him that he can obtain it by sparring with the instructors. Unfortunately, it will be a tougher match than a simple domain sparring like the one he had with Hyanon. Despite that, Seonghan believes it won't be long before he can fulfill his vow, but Seongha doesn't believe it would be as easy as he makes it sound. Seonghan reassures him that it's possible and advises him to just focus on how to pay the price while he handles the rest. Seongha says he's ready to provide whatever Seonghan requests as payment as long as it is within his means. Seongha then adds that he has a commission request of his own, making Seonghan wonder how he has already started making requests before they have even finalized their arrangement. Seongha wants to commission Seonghan to make him his own personalized spear since the dual resonant spear is to be submitted as an assignment to Reese. Once Seonghan made something as incredible as the dual short spear in just a few hours, Seongha can't even begin to imagine what kind of spear to expect from him. As they head out of the public training center, he nudges Seonghan, telling him to craft him a suitable weapon. As the duo teases each other about it, their bond level increases to level 2, and as the level increases their relationship will become more established. Seonghan is then informed that his relationship with Seongha is a transactional bond. This means that whenever a transaction is completed with Seongha, a bond stone will be generated. Therefore, the ripening speed of each bond stone increases when Seonghan is in a transaction with Seongha, and currently, there are no bond stones generated. A few days later, the long-awaited refining department's second-year regular auction begins at an auction house. Seonghan noticed that the hall was a bit more packed than usual, while Erika couldn't stop admiring how well Seonghan cleans up. Seonghan only dressed up because Inchul told him that his appearance as the department valedictorian was important. With Seonghan's title putting him in the spotlight, Michael can only pull his shady tricks from the shadows. Now, more than ever, Seonghan is curious about Michael's scheme to take over the refining department. Meanwhile, the host announces that the theme of the auction is iron swords, and a total of 36 items have been submitted for auction. A special quality verification process using a cloth named Siu Jumpo has also been added. This cloth, which is soft yet hard like metal, was woven from the melted fur of an S-class white tiger beast. It possesses resistance to slashing attacks. To demonstrate, the host slashes the tiger cloth with a sword that instantly breaks when it comes in contact with the cloth. This was done to identify weapons that have sacrificed durability just to increase cutting power. After the test, the first sword to be auctioned off is introduced, and while the auction continues, Erika asks Seonghan if he knows why they're using the Siu Jumpo to weed out the defective goods. Seonghan then breaks it down properly, explaining that the white tiger's body isn't just hard but its actual ability is more complex than people make it. Apparently its fur, hide, flesh, and bones all have different properties. The fur mimics the sharpness of the metal weapon it touches, so no matter how good the weapon is, the fur eats away at the durability. Hearing this, Erika begins to worry that Seonghan's white light longsword is also at a disadvantage since swords with increased cutting power usually have the lowest durability. Sehun agrees with her theory and notes that it's actually a clever plot orchestrated by Michael just to target him. This plot also targets Inkyul, who has been a loyal supporter because if the sword breaks, Inkyul's reputation as his supervising professor will also be ruined. but Se-hoon believes the ploy could never succeed since he properly made his submission. After working through the entire list, it was finally time for the last item, Se-hoon's white light longsword. The moment the blade struck the Seiyujumpo, an unexpected force repelled it. The longsword then bounced back, flew from its wielder's grasp, and plunged into the floor. Michael is completely stunned as he tries to wrap his head around what he has just witnessed. Seeing how confused the crowd looked, Se-hoon decided to explain what happened to help them out of their ignorant misery. He struts up to the stage like he owns the place and explains that a normal sword focused on sharpness would normally break against the Seiyujumpo, but the white light sword is different. It gathers mana scattered in the atmosphere and condenses it on the blade like a very thin edge. The crowd erupts again when they hear this because they couldn't feel any mana coming from the sword, but Se-hoon reveals that they can't feel anything because the mana density isn't high enough to be called sword kai. However, since the mana is too sharp to be mere light, it is expressed as sharpness aura. Erika wonders if what happened on stage earlier was due to this sharpness aura. Se-hoon confirms it is, and further explains that what happened earlier was the result of resonance between two identical sharpness. Since one can't cancel out the other, they resonate and bounce back. He then pulls out Erika's bond ore, which he plans to use to show them something more interesting on the white light longsword. Se-hoon then activates the stone and imprints it on the blade of the longsword, causing the irregularly fluctuating mana to be adjusted. Afterwards, he uses the Seiyujumpo as a whetstone to sharpen the edge, causing the white light longsword to rise to rare grade. Se-hoon is satisfied with this improved version achieved with a special whetstone. He then announces to the audience that a simple skill that strengthens the sharpness aura has been added, and the rank has been increased to rare grade. Se-hoon tells the host to reflect this in the starting price, so the host quickly refers to the manual and adjusts the starting price from 1 million to 5 million. Everyone is alerted as soon as they hear that the weapon has been upgraded from high to rare grade. Considering this is uncharted territory, hands soon begin to go up as everyone clamors to grab the white light longsword. Jake and Erika join the auction, and the duo soon start a bidding war with Erika, raising the price by 10 million every time Jake bids. Meanwhile, Se-hoon is completely stunned that his broken peaches were about to go from a measly 100,000 won to over 300 million. This was his first time seeing how the upper class threw money without a single care in the world. Suddenly, all the way from the exit, a voice echoes through the hall, bidding 600 million for the sword. Jake is shocked to hear this, but is not about to stop bidding because Arya already warned him to buy Se-hoon's weapon no matter the cost. Unfortunately, the bidder turns out to be none other than Yuna, the vice dean, and a glare from her tells Jake and Erika that they were about to step into dangerous waters. Knowing they can't go up against Yuna, Erika quietly backs out while Jake dreads how to face his sister. Meanwhile, Michael was starting to regret proposing this auction in the first place, as Se-hoon's success had turned out to be a huge slap on his face. The real winner, Inkyul, heaves a sigh of relief when the white light longsword finally sells for 600 million won. After the auction, Se-hoon receives the full amount from Yuna and asks how she plans to make use of the sword. Yuna tells him that she will test it out at a danger zone when she has time, since it's such a waste to simply use the longsword just for training. Se-hoon tells her that he also wants to see his masterpiece in action, and suggests testing it out in Yanwol Mountain. Yuna recalls that this is the same place chosen for the first year's subjugation practice. Se-hoon suggests visiting the mountain in advance before the subjugation practice, but Yuna feels that this place is beneath her status. However, as soon as Se-hoon promises to make her an armament in exchange, Yuna instantly begins to schedule the trip for next week. Se-hoon agrees to her schedule, but what Yuna doesn't know is that he's using testing the sword as an excuse. The main reason Se-hoon is going to Yanwol Mountain is because of a summit climber named Jürgen Kruger, the chairman of UD Group, which is the #1 global corporation. Jürgen is also known as the strongest necromancer, and the artifact he lost after being attacked by a demon of pandemonium is hidden in Yanwol Mountain. Elsewhere, Jake is getting reprimanded by Arya for failing to win the bid on Se-hoon's sword. Jake quickly apologizes, but surprisingly Arya doesn't hold it against him. Since Jake still takes a class with Se-hoon, she tells him to find a chance during the joint class to ask Se-hoon for an armament. Arya promises to help Jake speak to their father about his succession ceremony if he resolves the situation to please her. She then sternly reminds Jake that without her, he would be disqualified from the succession because he's about to lose his spot as the department's valedictorian. Jake is terrified because he was already anticipating all this in the first place, so before Arya can finish rubbing salt on his wound, he quickly accepts her offer. Jake then firmly promises to use whatever method possible to get a sword from Se-hoon. Instead of letting him go, Arya chuckles wickedly, asking why Jake interrupted her while she was still talking. Jake hurriedly apologizes while Arya glares at him, bluntly ordering him to bring her one of Se-hoon's swords by any means necessary. Se-hoon seemed to be getting on her nerves, and she couldn't stop thinking about how he talked trash about her at the martial arts hall. A few days later, Sehun submitted the dual short spears to Reese as his assignment entry. The Crimson one was a high-grade spear that stores fire attribute mana and increases the efficiency of the flame wheel. The Black spear was also high-grade, which can store dark attribute mana and increases the stability of the flame wheel. After carefully studying the spears, Reese admits that their craftsmanship is impressive. But what surprised him more was the flame wheel and auxiliary formulas embedded inside the spears, which can warn its user by repelling the attribute mana if an issue arises. Reese declares that Sehun's spears can be considered both a training tool and a textbook for others to learn. He then gives Sehun a perfect score and exempts him from attendance. The other students aren't so happy that they have to be in the same class with a genius monster like that. After thanking Reese, Sehun excuses himself since he gets a free pass to skip classes. Reese tells him to take his spears with him, or inform him if he plans to sell them. Afterwards, Sehun checks his next schedule, which turns out to be Guangshu's body control class. Upon entering the training room, Sehun runs into Jake, warming up. Jake wonders if Sehun also has a class with Guangshu right now, and Sehun explains that he just came in early to practice. Since the room was occupied, he decided to leave, but Jake stopped him to awkwardly ask for a favor. Knowing what he's about to ask for, Sehun blatantly refuses before Jake can say anything. Jake tries to make Sehun hear him out, but Sehun reveals that he already knows it has something to do with him making a weapon for Arya. He then repeats himself, clearly letting Jake know that he has no intention whatsoever of making a sword for his sister. It wasn't that he didn't want to make a sword for Arya, but just like the others, Sehun doesn't want her to lose interest in him. He knows that with his current skills, Arya would most definitely be disappointed with anything he crafts. However, Jake has no intention of giving up, so he pulls out a hero-grade hammer from his bag called the Hammer of Black Flames. This hammer is perfect for attribute training and was crafted by refining dragonite. Each side of it is coated with fire and dark attribute mana, amplifying the power of both attributes. After checking out the hammer, Sehun admits that it isn't bad at all, but has plenty of room for improvement. Jake then proposes a duel between them and uses the hammer as a wager. But if Sehun loses, he has to make a weapon for Arya. Sehun accepts without hesitation, but adds a condition that Jake must never mention his sister for a month if he loses the match. Jake agrees to his terms, and as they prepare to fight, he decides to go all out from the start to prevent any unexpected counterattack from Sehun like the last time. Just by clenching his fists, Jake compressed a ton of mana, making Sehun realize he must have been confident in his skills when he jumped in to stop that punch from Sionka last time. Sehun then deactivates Erika's social link stone and activates Yuna's gluttony iron. However, through the effect of the social link stone, his body's mana was already adjusted to its optimal state. Jake is surprised to see that Sehun's weapon of choice is a dual short spear, and he seems to be quite used to it from how he handles the spears. Jake can't help but wonder if Sehun can handle multiple weapons because he's a blacksmith. Nonetheless, he's confident that Sehun cannot beat him with a weapon he's only familiar with. Refusing to be a pushover, Jake boldly charges towards Sehun, confident that victory is his for the taking this time. But to his shock, Sehun effortlessly repels him with the Flame Wheel Ember Spear technique, leaving Jake rethinking his life decisions. Before regressing to the past, Sehun and Sionka exchanged many stories, and at first, Sehun did it just to raise his bond level. But after Sionka finally opened up to him, the duo shared techniques and Sionka taught him the Flame Wheel Ember. Sehun couldn't get the hang of it back then, so he had to put up with Sionka's constant criticism. But thanks to that knowledge, he can now manage to perform a crude imitation of it. As Jake and Sehun continue to clash with each other, Jake notes that he has been going in circles since he lost his flow at the beginning of the fight. However, he takes comfort in the fact that Sehun's physical abilities come from a skill, so Jake plans to wait for the effect of Sehun's skills to wear off before he can turn things around. Unfortunately, Sehun soon notices that Jake is trying to stall for time, but is still impressed with his talent to find a way out. But Sehun isn't about to just wait, so he activates the explosive ring to draw out dark attribute mana from the Ink Spider bracelet. The bracelet had collected the dark mana when Sehun gave his bracelet to Sionka during training, but Sehun didn't think he'd have to use it. Meanwhile, Jake is puzzled when he sees the dark attribute mana because he definitely heard that Sehun uses fire attribute mana. As he watches Sehun's flame surge, Jake realizes that Sehun is attempting something truly insane, so he resolves to go all out as well. He effortlessly compresses mana into his palm, after which he uses the Maya-style formless sword to unleash a strike known as the Blue Axis Light Thread with his bare hands. Sehun is impressed that Jake managed to execute sword arts without even wielding a sword. However, seeing that Jake is fighting seriously, he decides he can't lose either. Using his own first revision of the Flame Wheel Ember Spear, Sehun counters with the Eclipse Crescent Strike. The two strikes collide in a violent clash, and at the same moment, Jake and Sehun break through each other's defenses, each landing what could have been a decisive blow. Despite this, Jake readily admits defeat because he knows that in a real battle, Sehun's spear would have struck him down before he could deliver his final punch. As the dust settles from the clash, Sehun is informed that a bond has been established between him and Jake. Even though Jake accepted defeat, Sehun decided it was a tie, and Jake happily obliged, since he needed Sehun to make him a sword badly. However, Jake still admits that it should be considered a loss since he used a near-fatal skill as a desperate attempt. Otherwise, he couldn't have gotten remotely close to Sehun. Jake feels he could have done better if only he could use a sword, but unfortunately, his biggest regret is that he cannot wield one. Sehun is surprised to hear this, so Jake explains that he can't wield swords because they easily break whenever he holds them. He then reveals that he even once shattered a sword with hero-grade durability just by holding it. Without wasting any time, Sehun instantly figures out the cause and tells Jake to bring his right hand forward. Without asking why, Jake immediately complies, and Sehun warns him to keep his hand still. Jake is still trying to figure out what he plans to do when Sehun decides to smash his hand with the hammer of black flames. However, the strike doesn't even tickle Jake, but it helps Sehun confirm his suspicions that Jake's hands aren't exactly reinforced by mana, but it's more of an alteration of material. Jake, who is now recovered from a shock, barks at Sehun to give him a heads up next time. Jake is completely stunned when Sehun offers to craft a personalized sword for him. Sehun then extracts Jake's bondstone, which is a superior high-grade compression stone. It can endlessly compress absorbed mana and will break if the density exceeds its durability. Sehun plans to use this to make Jake a sword that won't break because of Jake's special physique. Before they can discuss it further, Guangxu barges into the room, and unexpectedly, a bond is formed between him and Sehun. As if enraged, Guangxu orders Jake to leave so he can have a quick chat alone with Sehun. As soon as Jake leaves, Guangxu begins to grill Sehun because he suspects something fishy is going on with him due to his sudden shift from seasoned blacksmith to skilled spearman. He sternly demands an explanation from Sehun to clear his misunderstanding, but like a nerd, Sehun considers it a compliment that his stance was so perfect it caused Guangxu to be suspicious of him. Sehun then shows him the bond or extracted from Erika, explaining that he simply used it as a cheap trick to apply a skill. He adds that the skill helps adjust his muscles perfectly to mimic another person's body. Sehun even activates the bondstone to show Guangxu how the social link threads help apply the skill, and the effect ends when the threads disappear. Guangxu seems to be buying the explanation, and even asks about the skill's limits, to which Sehun explains that it puts a strain on his body because it's basically forcing his own body to adjust. From the explanation, Guangxu realizes that Sehun is just using observation mimicry, so he apologizes for doubting him, explaining that he did it because there's a demon with a similar ability. This demon is called the doppelganger, and is one of the 10 evils of Pandemonium who enjoys mimicking his opponent's martial arts and then using it to end them. The doppelganger is a vicious demon responsible for ending the legacies of countless heroes. Guangxu harbors a deep grudge against it, having clashed with the demon in the past. In fact, the scar running across his face is a lasting reminder of that encounter. Sehun concludes that the bond between himself and Guangxu must have formed because Guangxu either suspected that he was the doppelganger or believed that Sehun could prove useful in tracking the demon down. Nevertheless, Sehun is simply glad that Guangxu considers him useful. After all, gaining one more bondstone is hardly a bad outcome. He tells Guangxu not to blame himself, since his suspicion was understandable given that it involved a demon. Believed that Sehun is not holding a grudge, Guangxu lets out a laugh and begins rambling in an attempt to ease the awkward atmosphere, leaving Sehun thoroughly confused. Now that he has some idea about Sehun's skills, Guangxu decides it was time to change up his training methods for Sehun. He then promises to notify Sehun once the new method has been finalized, and after acknowledging this, Sehun takes his leave. As he watches Sehun depart, Guangxu reflects on his remarkable skills, convinced that he could easily become the combat department's valedictorian. What surprises him most is that Sehun has come this far without the support of a powerful family. To Guangxu, Sehun was becoming increasingly intriguing, and he found himself looking forward to learning more about him. Shortly after, Sehun receives a call from Zhongha, who is eager to know what he wants as payment for their deal. Sehun reminds him that it's only been a day, and is in no rush to choose the payment method yet, but Zhongha feels uneasy, because he doesn't like owing favors. Sehun then asks Zhongha if he knows a Babel mage named Louise Volant, but Zhongha says he has never heard the name before. Sehun instructs Zhongha to secretly investigate everything about her, including her current whereabouts. However, he doubts that Zhongha has the necessary connections, considering that he is currently broke and holds little influence within the Flame Flower Gate. Zhongha tells Sehun not to underestimate him, insisting that he has other channels he can rely on. After the call, Sehun's thoughts drift to the explosive dog, Louise, as he finds himself wondering what she is doing at that very moment. Unlike Zhongha, who was popular before the regression, Louise wasn't well known back then. But the major problem right now is that she's a ticking time bomb. But Sehun believes he can get to her in time since she only turned into the notorious explosive dog after a terrible injury. Before he can even finish thinking about her, Zhongha calls back with news that he has found Louise, leaving Sehun stunned at the speed at which he got the information. Zhongha then reveals that Louise was a talented second-year salutatorian of the Elemental Department. But 6 months ago, during a spa in the martial arts hall, her wand exploded in her face. The accident permanently damaged her mana circuit, and now she's currently on a leave of absence, receiving treatment. Sehun is devastated to hear this, as his earlier thoughts about saving Louise in time begin to flood back to him. According to Zhongha, Louise is undergoing rehabilitation at Yost General Hospital, but she hasn't shown any improvement at all. Zhongha decides to send Sehun a detailed document file on his investigation, and just as their call ends, Jake shows up. Apparently, he had been waiting for Sehun to conclude their talk about the sword. Just then, Sehun receives the file from Zhongha and learns that Louise had the accident while sparring with the third-year valedictorian of the necromancy department, Gats Kruger. According to the report, Louise claimed her defective wand was made by the third-year valedictorian of the refining department, Pierre Barmett, who is also Michael's son and Han's older brother. After the incident, Louise sued Pierre for the faulty wand, but he countersued her for Sehun's defamation. Sehun then shows Jake the report, asking if he knows Pierre and Gats. Jake tells him that the Kruger and Barmett families are actually in-laws, and both of them are members of the Noblesse Network. Sehun promises to make Jake a sword in 1 week if he can investigate everything about Pierre and Gats. Although Jake is skeptical that Sehun can forge a sword in just 1 week, he immediately agrees to do whatever is asked in return. However, to his shock, Sehun's only request is for Jake to break his arm as cleanly as possible. Meanwhile, at Yost General Hospital, a team of doctors anxiously monitors Louise as they assess her recovery. It is her 159th attempt to use magic, but the moment she casts a flame spell, a sharp pain shoots through her neck at the same place where she was injured when her wand exploded. Louise cries out in agony, and as she coughs up blood, the doctors confirm that she is suffering from mana backflow, so they order her mana to be frozen. Apart from the pain, Louise is also plagued by the trauma of how she was fatally injured during the spa with Gats. The head doctor immediately orders the experiment to be halted, and tells his attendants to inject Louise with mana tranquilizers and neutralizers. However, Louise refuses to comply with the treatment and demands another shot to continue the experiment. The doctor turns her request down and informs her that her rehabilitation will be limited to 50 experiments per day. Louise is even more devastated when he announces that the magic used will be adjusted to the beginner level. Agitated by the news, she frantically begs the doctor to give her another chance while 2 medical staff members hold her tight to keep her from doing something stupid. But this doesn't stop Louise from trying to forcefully draw out her mana despite the doctor's warning. Seeing there's no reasoning with her, the doctor orders the staff to quickly bring the tranquilizers. Louise finally breaks free from the restraints and lunges towards the doctor, screaming that she can still do the experiment. But before she could get to him, a tranquilizer dart was fired at the back of her neck, instantly sending her to Lola Land. By the time she awakens, Louise finds herself in her hospital room, already regretting how she acted crazy earlier and blew her chance. She decides to stop blaming herself and find another way since the rehabilitation experiments don't seem to be working. She then decides to take a stroll outside to meditate, but on the way out, she bumps into someone, almost croaking her nose. She was just about to get hostile with a person when she raised her head to meet Sehun's cold gaze, sternly asking her what she was looking at. During an air raid before Sehun's regression, this was the same thing Louise said to him when they first met. That day, he almost lost his life in the raid because he trusted the wrong people. On his way out from the raid zone, Louise was quietly watching him from a distance, and when she came down, Sehun suspected she was the mastermind behind the terror attack. While he was busy staring at her, she walked past and bumped into him, after which she gave him that same cold glare, asking what he was looking at. Back in the present, Louise is left puzzled by Sehun's reaction, so he repeats the question again, but this time, she angrily hurls curses at him for talking trash instead of apologizing. Her outburst unexpectedly causes her mana to be drawn out, instantly draining her stamina. As she staggers to the ground, Sehun catches her just in time and gently advises her to quietly lie down if she's sick instead of wandering around aimlessly. He then offers to help her walk back to her room, But when Louise tries to turn him down, Si-hun threatens to call a nurse. Louise has no choice but to accept his offer because she will be grounded in her room if the doctor finds out she tried to exercise. She quietly follows Si-hun while wishing her body were in top form. Then she could have easily handled a wimpy-looking guy like Si-hun. After dropping Louise off in her room, Si-hun asks if she needs anything, and Louise tells him to hand her a small black box on the top of the side drawer. Si-hun hands her the box and promises to leave once he's sure she's feeling better. He urges her to take her drugs, but Louise scolds him for being nosy when they just met each other for the first time today. From inside the box, Louise pulls out an inhaler and presses the green contents into her mouth, which immediately stops her from coughing. Realizing what she just took, Si-hun begins to scold her for harming herself as if they've been buddies for a very long time. Louise is confused by his reaction, to which Si-hun explains that what she just used now is worsening her throat injury instead of helping. Louise is shocked by this revelation as she stares at the inhaler in her hand, confused. Louise finds this revelation hard to believe, but Si-hun assures her firmly that he's not kidding. Just then, Si-hun's name is called on the intercom, instructing him to come to the nurse's station immediately. As he turns to leave, Louise asks if he is really Si-hun. After confirming his identity, Si-hun reminds her to stop using the contents of the inhaler if she does not want to become magically disabled. However, before he can finish, Louise cuts him off and angrily orders him to leave, unable to let go of her grudge against blacksmiths. After driving him away, she curls up on her bed, cursing blacksmiths under her breath. After all, it was a blacksmith who had given her the faulty wand that ruined her life. Meanwhile, Si-hun is surprised when the system informs him that he has established a bond with Louise. At the nurse's station, Si-hun is told that his broken arm should heal in a week since there's no damage to his muscles or monocircuit. Si-hun wants to know when he'll be discharged, so the doctor tells him to rest for another week just to be safe. Si-hun is happy to hear that he can stay at the hospital for up to 2 weeks in total, which is enough time to get closer to Louise and help repair her damaged monocircuit. More than anything, Si-hun wants to use this time to figure out why she's taking a mana eroder as treatment for her throat. After his consultation with the doctor, Si-hun asks him about Louise and informs the doctor that he saw her clutching her throat after she tried to use magic in the hallway earlier. He reveals that Louise wanted him to keep it a secret, but he thought it best to tell someone because the situation seemed dangerous. After Si-hun was done snitching, the doctor acknowledged his report and told him that he could leave. The following morning, Si-hun receives a call from Jake to report back on what he was told to investigate. Jake tells Si-hun that after his investigation, he found something suspicious about the accident involving Louise. Apparently, the incident is related to Babel's Ivory Tower, an independently operated sponsorship foundation. Ivory Tower provides sponsorships from magic professors, alumni, and other related organizations. The Foundation's influence on magic cadets is absolute since they operate separately from Babel. The Ivory Tower selects scholarship students each year from the magic cadets, and Gotts Kruger was aiming for the second-year scholarship, but his strongest competition was none other than Louise. Jake reveals that right before the scholarship sparring match, the Barmett family sponsored Louise's weapon, but it exploded, and in the end, Gotts automatically received the Ivory Tower scholarship. Jake found all this suspicious because the Barmett and Kruger families are not just related by marriage, but they have a deep cooperative relationship, so it seems Gotts and Pierre joined forces to take out Louise, but Si-hun is still curious about how the inhaler fits into the whole conspiracy. Jake then goes on to report that Louise's professor from the element department, Charles, went above and beyond to help her out, and is still sponsoring her treatment right now. However, Si-hun already figured that something was suspicious about this so-called good mentor. He then thanks Jake for the information, but before he can hang up, Jake begs him to reach out to Yunya, Seungha, and Erika because they might swallow him whole soon. Apparently, after learning that Si-hun was sent to the hospital because of Jake, the trio have been breathing down his neck, blaming him for hurting their person. Si-hun agrees to help him mediate, and after the call, he immediately sends Seungha a message, telling him to leave Jake alone. Next, he tries to talk to Erika, but realizes that he doesn't even have a number, but he can't figure out why she would be so concerned about him. Deciding to talk to her later, Si-hun heads to Louise's room to check on her, but the moment she realizes he's the one outside her door, Louise forcibly pulls him into the room. She pins him to a wall and begins to curse and scold him for snitching on her. As of Si-hun's report yesterday, she was scolded by her doctor, and her rehabilitation experiment was completely cancelled. The doctor grounded her in her room for 2 whole weeks, and even after that, she would have to restart the rehabilitation experiment at level 1. Louise continues to scold Si-hun for ruining all the hard work she put in for the past 6 months, thanks to his meddling. Si-hun ignores her rant to simply ask about the inhaler, to which Louise assures him that she didn't use it after his warning yesterday. Sihan is relieved to hear this and declares that he would help her fix her monoburns. Louise stops ranting the moment she hears this, but she laughs off his claim because she feels he probably doesn't even know what monoburns are. Sihan explains that monoburn is an incurable disease that even top summit climbers can't do anything about. However, this is only true for those who aren't living a second life like Sihan. Seeing that Sihan seems to know what he's talking about, Louise decides to give him a chance to talk. Sihan immediately pulls out the inhaler from Louise's drawer and demands to know who she got it from. Louise replies that Professor Charles gave her the inhaler. Sihan tells Louise that the inhaler contains a substance known as a manorodor. To explain its effects more clearly, he decides to demonstrate by inhaling its contents himself. He then activates the Divine Spirit Link magic skill, allowing Louise to observe in real time how the manorodor works. Sihan explains that it is similar to an electrical circuit, which, under normal circumstances, operates at 110 volts. However, after using the inhaler, the mana circuit around the neck is forced to operate at over 220 volts. As time passes, the mismatch between the two different currents creates a conflict that eventually results in overload, damaging the mana pathways and making it impossible for the user to manipulate mana at all. The revelation that she may never be able to use mana shocks Louise, as she grabs her neck thinking about how Charles told her that the inhaler would be effective for her recovery. She even thanked him because he encouraged her to overcome her injury and urged her to never give up, no matter what pain comes her way. But now, Sihan was telling her that the person she trusted the most was trying to harm her. Enraged, Louise trembles as it begins to dawn on her that Charles was just playing with her, so she angrily vows to make him pay no matter what. Satisfied with the determined look in Louise's eyes, Sihan lets her know that he can't really fix her damaged circuits because he's just a blacksmith. However, he can calibrate her mana usage to help her use magic again. Louise doesn't mind as long as she can use magic, so she asks what Sihan wants in return. Sihan bluntly asks her to help him explore the 6 great demon realms in the future in exchange for his services. He then tells her to choose either to trust him and change her future or just remain the same and give up. Louise immediately accepts his proposal and her attitude towards him instantly changes. The duo jokingly tease each other as they shake on it like Louise wasn't trying to kill Sihan only a few moments earlier. Afterwards, Sihan gives Louise a bag of cherries as her training tools for the day. Louise is confused and doesn't see how eating cherries is supposed to fix her problem. During her curiosity, Sihan decides to go over her condition before they begin. Sihan then asks Louise if she knows the type of mana that causes pain when it flows through damaged circuits like the ones in her neck. Louise replies that it must be refined mana, and Sihan lets her know that she's correct. He then explains that it's the reason she can't feel pain in the rest of her body even though mana is circulating. According to Sihan, the ambient mana flowing naturally through Louise's body isn't an issue. Before she uses magic, she has to circulate refined mana throughout her body, and this type of mana causes pain when it passes through any damaged circuit, like the one localized in her neck area. Therefore, the only way Louise can use mana in her current state is to refine the unrefined mana directly with her tongue before it hits her throat. Just as she is about to object, Sihan reassures her that, while such a feat would be impossible for most people, she is the one exception. Louise is deeply moved by his confidence in her abilities, but what she does not realize is that Sihan's faith is based on his memories from before his regression. In his previous life, Louise earned the title of the explosive dog by mastering this very method. Encouraged by his words, Louise agrees to follow his instructions, and Sihan explains that the cherries are meant to train the mana circuits inside her mouth. He demonstrates the basic technique and tells her that she must delicately manipulate the mana circuits in her tongue. However, the longer Louise listens, the more her determination begins to waver because Sihan's explanation is starting to sound like the ramblings of a lunatic. After all, it is not every day that someone watches a grown man perform increasingly questionable demonstrations with a cherry. Afterwards, they moved on to the next step, which was making Louise shout a lot of profanity. Sihan claimed it was to train her to shout with all her might while infusing mana and emotion. Next, he trained her using tongue twisters to simultaneously pronounce 2 difficult sentences, after which she had to do it with a chopstick in between her lips. After a week of relentless tongue training, Louise was able to manipulate the cherry stem using her tongue. Louise brags about her talent when Sihan commends her for achieving it in just a week. Sihan figures she picked it up that fast, probably because she was the one who created the training method before his regression. Suddenly, Louise grabs her hair in frustration, complaining that all she has managed to do is improve her vocalization, which she believes has nothing to do with mana. Feeling guilty for taking it out on Sihan, she apologizes for her sudden outburst and tells him to move on to the next thing. For the next training, Sihan says it's going to be about refining the mana used for incantation magic. At first, Louise is excited that they're moving to something useful, But her excitement doesn't last, knowing that incantation magic can be very hard. Si-hun tells her to watch closely while he demonstrates once. According to Si-hun, incantation magic requires two important factors. The first one is the minimum amount of mana to serve as the core of the formula, and the second is a strong will to manifest it as magic. This means that a mental image is crucial because the clearer the form of the magic in one's mind, the stronger the incantation becomes. To demonstrate, Si-hun visualizes a sphere, which materializes instantly in front of him. He then reshapes it into a form better suited for projection before imagining elemental properties being infused into it. Next, he accelerates it to increase both its speed and power as it shoots out through the window, shattering the glass. Before it can travel further, Si-hun disperses it in mid-air through sheer force of will. After the demonstration, he apologizes to Louise, explaining that he became too focused and broke the window without realizing it. He is about to offer to pay for the window when he notices that Louise has been quiet the entire time, so he figures she might be angry. However, Louise was silent because she was attempting to copy everything she had just witnessed. Surprisingly, Louise easily creates a sphere just as Si-hun did, and Si-hun is amazed that she could recreate it after seeing it just once. She even adds a few adjustments to the flare, such as increasing its size. Si-hun watches in excitement as Louise demonstrates the truth that magic defies the laws of this world. In this case, both Si-hun and Louise have bent the rules of magic itself, all from a single word shaped by a strong mental image. After testing out her new skills, Louise is over the moon when she realizes her neck doesn't hurt from using incantation magic. Seeing how emotional she looks, Si-hun lets her know she can cry if she wants to, but Louise refuses to shed a tear until she gets back at the trio who harmed her. Si-hun then announces that it is time to move on to the next step. Louise, however, is confused, as she had believed that successfully casting magic without the usual pain in her neck was the final goal. But Si-hun prepares to register her for something guaranteed to help her overcome her trauma. Meanwhile, at the Ivory Tower mock training ground, two boys are seen struggling to fight against an overpowered skeleton, but they are being overwhelmed by it. As they're wondering why a mere skeleton is that strong, the boys are soon defeated while the mastermind behind the skeleton watches them from a distance. It was none other than Götz Kruger from the necromancy department and Louise's nemesis. Just then, he receives a call and orders the fighting freshman to leave the arena while he takes the call. It was a call from Pierre, informing him that someone had posted a challenge against him on the Ivory Tower's cafe board. After checking the board, Götz angrily slams his fist on the table as he curses under his breath. The public challenge came from Louise, who revealed her condition and announced that she had overcome the damage to her mana circuits. She also declared that she could use magic once again, and before returning to school, wanted to settle her score by challenging Götz to a duel. Louise's post quickly spread throughout the student body, making it nearly impossible for Götz to ignore the challenge. However, what no one realized was that the true mastermind behind it was Si-hun, and he had arranged for the duel to take place 1 week later in the martial arts hall. To ensure that Götz could not back out, Si-hun cleverly used reverse psychology by ending the post with a taunt, telling Götz to respond if he was too afraid to accept the challenge. This final remark infuriates Götz so much that he smashes his phone to pieces in a fit of anger while cursing Louise for daring to mock him. Determined to put her in her place, Götz swore to beat her to death, no matter how she managed to recover or make sure she's crippled for life. Back at the hospital, Louise is still scolding Si-hun for posting the challenge, while Si-hun can't understand why she's reacting so strongly when it's just a simple duel and not a deathmatch. Louise explains that she's not ready to take her revenge because her incantation magic is barely at the beginner level. She was even starting to think Si-hun might be a spy sent by Pierre to drag her into the abyss. Si-hun tells her to chill and reassures her that he didn't just post the challenge on a whim. According to Si-hun, he did it to help her overcome her trauma because a strong mental will is important for incantation magic. Since it's an instinctive magic, Louise's mental state greatly influences her results, and because of the incident with Götz, she's too afraid to use magic, which in turn limits her power. Si-hun lets her know that the duel is absolutely necessary to overcome that trauma, so he tells her to trust him, even though it seems difficult. However, Louise is afraid that she might lose and just make her trauma worse than it already was. To encourage her, Si-hun pats Louise on the shoulder, reassuring her that there's no way she'd lose to a talentless fraud like Götz. Louise is touched to hear these words as Si-hun begins to extract Louise's bondstone. He then informs her that he has prepared a special material to make her armament. Si-hun plans to use her dying water bondstone, a supreme high grade or that enhances and specializes the properties of any mana infused into it. Louise lets out a sigh of relief and decides to place her complete trust in Si-hun. With her doubts finally set aside, she asks him what their next training session will require, but he lets her know that it's just an examination. After wearing a glove and using his teeth to adjust it, Sehun announces that he will be giving her an oral examination. Louise is puzzled by the sudden request, but before she can react, Sehun goes on to do what he wants to do while she hurls curses at him as usual. Meanwhile, back at school, students begin speculating about what really happened to Louise. Many find it suspicious that a sponsored weapon would suddenly explode just before the special scholarship selection exam. One student argues that accidents involving magical armaments do happen from time to time. However, the other dude refuses to believe that such a basic mistake could come from a prestigious blacksmith family like the Barmets. He insists that a conspiracy between the Barmet and Kruger families makes more sense, given the close relationship between the two. Besides, he points out that Louise would have been the one selected for the scholarship if it weren't for the incident. Meanwhile, in a nearby building, Gotts listens to the rumors circulating below while being harshly chewed out over the phone by his older brother for creating such a mess. Gotts apologizes, but his brother warns him to resolve the situation on his own, explaining that the family's intervention would only make matters worse. Gotts wishes his father could step in, knowing it would settle everything instantly. Unfortunately, that is not an option at the moment, and his older brothers are probably delighted, as eliminating one more rival would allow them to claim a larger share of the UD group's inheritance. A few moments later, his so-called best friend, Pierre, arrives, and Gotts initially teases him sarcastically, but his expression quickly hardens as he angrily demands to know why Pierre came to see him instead of lying low. The two had agreed not to be seen together to avoid drawing further suspicion to what they had done to Louise 6 months earlier. Gotts is infuriated when Pierre doesn't respond, so he walks up to him angrily, cursing and demanding that Pierre say something. Gotts blames him for changing their plan at the last minute, which was initially to get Louise expelled and thrown into prison. He demands to know if changing the plan at the last minute was ordered by Professor Charles. Feeling guilty, Pierre apologizes for making the situation worse. However, Gotts cuts him off, telling him to forget the apology and focus on finding a solution. Otherwise, the two of them could be pushed out of the line of succession together. Pierre tells Gotts not to worry and reassures him that he already has a plan to deal with Louise once and for all. A few days later, Sehun is seen checking out Louise's bondstone because it was different from the one from before his regression. Louise's former bond used to adapt materials, but in this life, it is now adapting itself to the materials. It was as if it had become much more flexible and cooperative, but Sehun feels this might have been its original state before it transformed into the one he used to know. However, with this material, he admits that he can make something better. Just then, Louise arrives to check on him because she heard he took off his cast, but she finds him staring at the bond ore. Louise then asks if that is the material he prepared for her armament. Sehun explains that it is just the submaterial needed and it just arrived so they can go ahead and make the armament. He then directs her to sit and infuse the stone with mana until it stops changing color. While Louise is infusing the stone with mana, Sehun decides to focus on crafting the main material. He is relieved that things are different with Louise in this life because before regressing, he focused on correcting what was already corrupted. But this time, her condition is better and her bond material is supportive, so he plans to make an armament that can draw out more power. First, he infuses mana into the projection alloy, then spreads it out into a thin square and simultaneously distributes and engraves the mana circuits evenly. Watching Sehun distribute the circuits, Louise is amazed that he can actually perceive such complex circuits. Once she is done infusing mana into the bond stone, Sehun tells her to carefully place it on top of the alloy. The moment the stone hits the alloy, it explodes as its contents rapidly run through the circuits, activating several skills that Sehun had engraved on the alloy earlier. The advantage of doing this is that it's much simpler than enchanting, but the disadvantage is that it has a short duration. However, the dying water bondstone, which reflects these infused skills, makes up for the disadvantage. As a beautiful array of colors explodes from the surface of the alloy, Louise notices that Sehun had engraved 73 types of incantations. Afterward, the mana-infused alloy plates begin assembling themselves according to the circuit layout. Before long, the armament, Vaga, is finally complete. It is a high-quality, rare-grade armament in the form of a neck choker, designed to amplify the user's will imbued within their mana. Louise asks if she can try using the armament, but Sehun warns her that she can't fully control it, so she needs to use it with the weakest magic possible. A few minutes later, just as Louise's doctor is passing by, an explosion erupts from her room. Once the dust settles, Louise apologizes for making a mess while Sehun scolds her for not listening to his warning. 1 week later, students flock to the martial arts hall, eager to see whether Louise will honor her public challenge. The venue buzzes with speculation about whether she will appear, while others remain skeptical, as rumors that her injuries left her unable to use magic continue to circulate. Meanwhile, Sehun walks through the crowd, thinking about Louise. She had told him not to come, insisting that his presence would only make it harder for her to focus. Even so, Sehun intends to encourage her, knowing she is likely feeling nervous before the duel. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound and stops at the end of the hallway, wondering if he's the only one hearing it. Sehun then follows the sound all the way to the 3rd floor where it is getting clearer. He also notices that the sound has a similar resonance to mana erosion, which makes him believe someone is targeting Louise. He continues to follow the sound and finally finds that it's originating from the storage near Louise's waiting room. Using the hammer he got from Jake, Sehun breaks down the door, and upon entering, he instantly recognizes that the sound is coming from inside a box on the other end of the room. As Sehun approaches the box, a familiar voice calls out to him. Even before turning around, he recognizes it as his master from before his regression. The distorted illusion of his master immediately begins mocking him for turning back time with nothing more than a shabby dagger. It even draws out his final memories of the 3 mad dogs dying. The fake master insists that the regression never happened, and claims that his current life is nothing more than a dream. Its goal is to corrupt Sehun's mind, tricking him into accepting a false reality and forcing him to believe that he is truly dead. Unfortunately for the illusion, it picked the wrong person to manipulate as Sehun calmly turns the tables, pointing out that his real master would never waste time delivering a long monologue while trying to kill someone. With that, he knocks the fake master's hand aside and smashes his hammer straight into her face. The impact shatters the illusion and simultaneously destroys the machine that had been emitting the corrupted mana. After he's done, Sehun curses them for daring to impersonate his master without thinking about the consequences. Just because he was able to break through the illusion, Sehun acquired a new skill he never had even before his regression, called Awakening Dream. Sehun decides to check it out later and investigate the machine that created the illusion, but just as he's about to pick it up, the device explodes, leaving a familiar mark on the floor. Sehun immediately recognizes it as the symbol for an organization called Dawn, a fanatical group of mags who worship magic. They are especially dangerous as their ideology and actions are extremely radical. Before his regression, Dawn was the organization that placed a leash on Louise and branded its symbol onto her neck. Now they are already setting their sights on her this early, and with only 10 minutes remaining before the duel, Sehun grows increasingly worried about Louise. He was still feeling the lingering effects of the mana erosion himself, which means Louise would likely be suffering even more. Just as he feared, Louise is about to experience the same ordeal as strange noises echo through her waiting room, causing her to snap her head from side to side in search of the source. She was already on edge because of the upcoming duel, but the unsettling sounds only made her even more nervous. Unable to locate the source of the disturbance, Louise instinctively touches her bandaged neck as her resolve begins to waver. She worries that, with the bandage still visible, no one will believe she has truly recovered despite all the effort she put into her recovery. So she decides to remove it, while quietly encouraging herself as she does so. In the next moment, a voice calls her pathetic, and she is abruptly pulled into a dark illusion. Her deepest fears are dragged to the surface, trying to convince her she is still the same helpless broken girl she once was. Even her confidence begins to crumble as the illusion whispers that the person Sehun believed in is nothing more than worthless trash. Tears stream down Louise's face as she struggles desperately to break free from the mental corruption taking hold of her mind. Fortunately, Louise's resolve begins to rise as Sehun's image suddenly appears within the illusion. Clinging to that presence, she starts crawling toward him while battling her inner demons. The thought of disappointing Sehun becomes the only anchor keeping her from succumbing to the corruption. Then, Sehun's voice echoes through the room, telling her to snap out of it. And the next moment, the door swings open and Sehun steps inside to see Louise collapsed on the floor. She soon regains consciousness, and finally snaps back to reality, wondering why Sehun was there. As he crouches beside her, Sehun asks if she heard a ringing sound. Louise is surprised that he heard the same sound as her, and Sehun tells her that her enemy set it up, but he destroyed the source on his way here. He explains that the device triggered her memory by stimulating the mana erosion in her body. Louise figures this must be why she suddenly had a panic attack, but that was already enough to mess with her brain. Looking defeated, she starts blaming her weak self for falling for their tricks again after confidently saying she would get her revenge. Louise's determination to fight had gone with the wind, and right now she was feeling like a pathetic loser. Refusing to let her wallow in self-pity, Sehun decides to use reverse psychology on her. He agrees with her conclusion that it's truly pathetic and lame that she was confidently talking big only a few hours ago, but now she was moping around like a loser. Louise can't believe the words coming out of the person who initially encouraged her to do this. But Sehun doesn't just stop there, as he continues to tug her nerves as if to provoke some reaction from her. He even advises her to give up and just run away if she can't handle the pressure. He lets her know that none of the audience who came to watch the duel expects her to win since she has already lost once before. Sehun says everyone will curse and bully her at first, but once the dust dies down, they'll quickly forget she even exists. Meanwhile, Louise quietly listens as Sehun mocks her pain and even tells her that she runs using the excuse of trauma. After a few minutes of ruthlessly taunting and mocking her for being a coward, Sehun is about to begin another round when Louise suddenly barks at him to stop. However, Sehun refuses to back down, causing her face to darken as she yells for him to shut his trap. Completely enraged, Louise angrily hurls insults at him, reprimanding him for running his mouth when he hasn't experienced her pain. She suddenly lunges at Sehun like a mad dog ready to punch him at any time. Louise continues to blame him for putting so many expectations on her and encouraging her at the hospital, only to turn around and treat her like trash now. She soon punches him in the face, angrily admonishing him for treating her trauma lightly. She's about to land another punch when she suddenly holds back and settles for just screaming words at him while blood trickles from the side of Sehun's mouth where he was punched earlier. Louise lets Sehun know that she has tried her best not to break down or run away and expresses how frustrated she is right now because of the pressure to do well. After pouring out her heart, her voice breaks as she hurls more insults at Sehun for being arrogant. Life set off again. She yells at him, letting him know that he would be responsible if she loses the duel. Louise is stunned and finally calms down when Sehun gently tells her that he will take responsibility if she loses. This immediately reminds her of how confident he was in her at the hospital, and told her that there was no way she could lose to a piece of trash like Gartz. Sehun already told her that he never fights losing battles, so now he tells her to do two things for him. One of them is to trust him until the very end, and the other is for Louise to do her best and tear her opponent to shreds. Shortly after their emotional confrontation, Louise appears in the arena to face her nemesis with Sehun's words engraved on her heart. Like every single dumb villain about to have their peaches handed to them, Gartz immediately begins to taunt and mock her. He asks Louise if she came to face him just to protect her last shred of petty pride. As he summons his expensive skeletons to show off his power, the audience is amazed by his hero-grade armament. Apparently one of Gartz's skeletons costs at least tens of millions of won, and right now he has quite a few of them. While everyone else is awestruck by Gartz's arsenal, Louise is disappointed she fell to such a shallow loser masquerading as a powerful necromancer. Shortly before the match began, Louise could finally see that her opponent was much weaker and more pathetic than she remembered. As soon as the countdown begins, the Varga armament around her neck begins to transform, encircling her in mana. Louise says she's been waiting for this moment for the past 6 months. At the same time, Gartz, who was just feeling smug only a few seconds ago, is confused when he sees Louise's mana. From his investigation and setup, she wasn't supposed to be able to use mana, so he couldn't understand how she was doing it. The countdown soon ends, and the Varga transformed into a mask covering Louise's face, except her eyes. Determined to enjoy her revenge as much as possible, Louise begs Gartz to hold out for as long as he can. Still thinking he's the main protagonist, Gartz orders his skeletons to attack Louise, and as they charge towards her, Louise remains calm. Without even moving a muscle, she uses mental magic to stop them in their tracks and encircle their heads with the skill Death Bite. The next moment, she clenches her fist, instantly beheading them with the Death Bite circle. Gartz is utterly shocked as he watches his precious skeletons crumble to the ground like dominoes, yet he refuses to give up. Since he's a necromancer, Gartz believes he can just restore his minions and make them continue fighting. At least, that is what he thought until he realized he had also become the target of Louise's death circle. However, before she can activate it, a shield instantly forms around Gartz, pushing the circle off his neck. This shield was the arena's safety mechanism to protect students from killing their opponents during a match. Gartz reasons that his head would have been rolling on the floor if not for the safety mechanisms. Even so, he could still feel a slight pain from the circle tightening on his neck earlier. Gartz blames Pierre for giving him false information that Louise couldn't use magic because of damaged circuits. Knowing he's just trash and there's no way he can face the monster in front of him, Gartz decides to put himself first by quitting while he's ahead. Just then, Louise coldly taunts him for depending on the safety barrier to survive. Gartz ignores the provocation and raises his hand to surrender, but before he can even finish saying the words, Louise sets the death circle on both of his wrists, ankles, and neck. This time, though, instead of trying to finish him, she only activates a revenge bite, which does exactly what he did to her by destroying his circuits. As soon as his mana circuits are destroyed, Gartz crumbles to the ground, and Louise is declared the winner. The arena falls silent as they stare down at the stage in shock, as if hypnotized, unable to make a sound. Afterwards, Louise turns to the audience and with a cold glare, warns that anyone who messes with her will face the same fate. With that, she confidently struts out of the martial arts hall arena, leaving Gartz completely soulless. After the duel, Gartz ends up in the hospital, hooked to an oxygen tube to help him breathe. He was severely injured, and Louise's attack damaged 38 mana circuits, making it impossible for him to ever use magic again. Michael and Pierre came to check on Gartz after receiving several serious complaints from the UD group and Dawn. Michael scolds Pierre for causing them to lose a pawn, whom he admits is an idiot, but is useful because of his talent. Pierre apologizes to his father, and Michael asks how he plans to handle the situation. Pierre explains that he plans to deal with Louise once she enters the ivory tower, and as for Sihun, Pierre suggests dealing with him at the upcoming subjugation practice. He promises to finish Sihun cleanly, but begs his father to provide a little support on his end. Michael considers the request for a moment before agreeing to provide support as long as Pierre's plans don't cause any issues for him. Pierre is about to thank him when Michael coldly warns him that he will be forced to give up his succession rights if he fails again. Pierre acknowledges the warning and promises to keep it in mind. After Michael steps out of the room, Pierre stares down at his so-called best friend as he begins to think about Sihun, who ruined his plans. Meanwhile, Sihun is checking out his new skills, oblivious to the fact that he has earned a new enemy. Sihun's new skill, Awakening Dream, is a self-hypnosis process that forcibly awakens a clouded mind. It is automatically triggered when mental contamination reaches a certain level, but its effect decreases if activated continuously for a short period of time. Sihun closes his eyes as he tries to figure out how the skill works. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand how he obtained a skill he never had in his past life. This is because in order to acquire, one must possess a certain level of relevant aptitude to handle that skill. But Sihun doesn't remember having anything remotely related to this skill. Still focused on figuring it out, Sihun recalls the illusion he experienced in the storage room of the martial arts hall, and it immediately triggers the activation of the Awakening Dream skill. Sihun abruptly awakens as it finally dawns on him how the skill actually works. He notes that the new skill sort of provides a mental barrier for him, and he can even use it with the dream ivory he got from the Ascension Emperor, Ludwig. Just then, Louise joins him, asking what he was doing sitting there alone, and Sihun tells her that he was just meditating. She then plops into the seat next to him, heaving as if she just walked a mile and came back. Sihun asks if she's done with her hospital discharge procedures, and Louise lets him know that she hasn't because she still has tests scheduled all week. Sihun reasons it must be because her doctor, and Jung-won, is a really good doctor. Louise admits that Sihun is right as she explains that Jung-won really helped her in so many ways over the past 6 months she was stuck in the hospital. She then informs Sihun that she already met her professor, Charles, yesterday. During the meeting, Louise pretended not to know about what he did, and Charles maintained his saintly facade. He congratulated Louise on being able to use magic and asked if she would return to the elemental department. He assumed she was going to return, so Charles informed her that he would help her get selected as the Ivory Tower Scholarship recipient. However, before he could finish talking, Louise cut him off and bluntly let him know that she won't be returning. She then thanked him for the offer and informed him that she plans to transfer to the martial arts department when she returns to Babel. She explained that it is because her new magic technique is different from the standard technique used by the elemental department. After he heard her explanation, Charles didn't even react and simply told her to find him anytime she changed her mind. Louise just managed to fake a smile, but thinking about it now, she admits to Sihun that she had a tough time holding herself back from tearing Charles to shreds. Sihun then comforts Louise for exerting self-control as his mind wanders off to the Dawn organization, which he figures Charles must belong to. According to the knowledge before his regression, Sihun remembers that Dawn is just a small unit within a group of lunatics who tried to shape the 6 great demon gods into a form they desired. Basically, Dawn is a group of mags that worship magic, and they're within a bigger group called the Watchers. Before the regression, Dawn was the one who tricked Louise into joining them and turned her into their puppet. Sihun suspects they're behind everything that happened to Louise and have been playing the long game. Louise then begins to pour out her heart to Sihun, expressing how helpless she felt when she was first admitted to the hospital. Back then, she thought she would be expelled, so she just waited in agony because she felt that someone like her was just cannon fodder who could never be the hero. She felt so insignificant that she never even dreamed of getting revenge on those who harmed her. Instead, she was so scared of her bleak future that she saw the hospital as a hiding place. Thinking back to her attitude then, Louise admits that she was truly stupid. But thanks to Sihun, she now has a reason to keep moving forward. She reasons that all those hardships she faced in the past were probably preparing her so she could face the future. After all that suffering led her to meet Sihun, learn incantations, and even defeat gods. As she begins to get emotional, Louise stops and simply thanks Sihun for helping her. This causes Sihun's bond with her to rise to level 2, meaning their relationship was getting defined and more established. Sihun's bond with Louise was a guidance relationship, and a bondstone is generated whenever Sihun correctly guides her. Meanwhile, Si-hoon is surprised that Louise thanked him because the explosive dog from before his regression could never say something like that. Afterwards, Louise prepares to take a leave, but Si-hoon tells her to leave the Vaga armament behind. He explains that it's broken from overload, so he plans to use it to make a new one. Si-hoon is surprised when Louise suddenly asks why she should leave it behind. With a mischievous grin on her face, she lets him know that the Vaga is now hers. The following day, Jake approaches Si-hoon to let him know that he has gathered all the material Si-hoon requested for the creation of his weapon. Although Si-hoon still has a mountain of work to get through, he agrees to look over the materials before the next class. Noticing the towering stack of papers on Si-hoon's desk, Jake asks what they are. Si-hoon explains that there are 2 weeks' worth of assignments that have piled up. Jake feels bad for him, but Si-hoon confidently assures Jake that he can finish them all in a single day. A few moments later, they arrive at Jake's impressive mansion, and Si-hoon can't help but wonder if Jake cleaned up because he was coming over. Jake quickly tells him that the house is always this tidy. He then shows Si-hoon where the materials are, and it turns out to be a top-tier, rare-grade water golem core. Apparently, this core is the power source of a naturally generated water golem. It produces a special liquid whose durability matches the golem's physical body, with its strength depending on the amount of mana it absorbs. Right now, the core's mana was charged up to 100%. Jake wonders how Si-hoon plans to forge a sword from it, and Si-hoon explains that they first have to let the core mature. He then uses the white light style to carefully infuse mana into the core, and gradually, he thins the white light to achieve a more precise infusion. Once the core begins to react inside the water bowl, having reached the limit of its capacity, Si-hoon stops the process. Jake is confused as he wonders if Si-hoon is trying to overload the core. Si-hoon confirms that he is overloading it because 100% isn't enough. Jake then suggests using a higher grade core instead of overloading this one, which would cause a mess. But Si-hoon ignores his concerns and tells him to simply watch as he uses incantation magic to increase the core's assimilation and enhance its perception. After a few more spells to synchronize the core and activate hydrofusion, Si-hoon takes Jake's right hand and pricks it to drip the blood on the core. As the blood infused with the core, Jake could feel a strange sensation, and it was as if he was looking into a part of his own body. Si-hoon then instructs him to drop his blood in the bowl once a day for the next week until the water golem's core stops absorbing the blood. Jake wonders what kind of process this is, and Si-hoon explains that it's just a simple process to trick Jake's body. According to Si-hoon, Jake's abnormal grip is called a compression phenomenon caused by mana, and it is difficult to control. However, instead of controlling it, Si-hoon is trying to exploit a loophole in the skill by feeding Jake's blood to the core, which will eventually become the heart of his armament. The skill mistakes the weapon for a part of Jake's own body. Hearing the explanation, Jake finally realizes that this must be why he felt as though he were looking into a mirror when his blood touched the core. Si-hoon asks if he has any more questions, but Jake says he doesn't, and rather than asking for another explanation he probably wouldn't fully understand, he decides to trust Si-hoon. After all, this is a completely new forging method, one he has never even heard of, so he can't help but feel a little skeptical. Even so, for some reason, Jake finds himself believing that anything is possible as long as Si-hoon is the one making it happen. He then confirms the process of dripping blood until the core stops absorbing it, and Si-hoon commends him for paying attention. With nothing else left to do, Si-hoon heads back to the main hall of the refining department. Before coming, Si-hoon expected the lesson to be unusual, considering how complex and abstract the subject is. Even so, nothing prepared him for the scene before him.